Hello everyone, I am MANO Scaling, and I am here to help you today. I know you use this video to fall asleep, so before that, please like the video and subscribe to the channel, and also tell me where you are from and what time you are watching. Now get comfortable and relax. My name is Cassandra Wright. I'm 32 years old. This happened in August of 2024. Some wounds never heal. Not the physical ones, those eventually mend, leaving scabs and scars as proof that your body fought and survived. I'm talking about the other kind. The invisible gashes that tear through your soul when you witness something your mind wasn't built to comprehend. It's been 9 months since that backpacking trip through Sage Creek Wilderness in Badlands National Park, South Dakota. 9 months of therapy, medication, and nightmares that jolt me awake, drenched in sweat, screaming into the darkness of my bedroom. My therapist suggested I write it all down, every horrific detail, as if putting these memories on paper might somehow exorcise them from my mind. I doubt it will work. But I've tried everything else. The trip was supposed to be a celebration. My best friend Eliza had just finished her PhD in geology, and her boyfriend Marcus suggested we take her on a wilderness adventure before she started her new research position at the University of Minnesota. Marcus invited his childhood friend Trent to round out our group. I'd never met Trent before, but Eliza assured me he was a little intense but really dependable in the outdoors. I should mention that I wasn't an experienced hiker. Growing up in suburban Chicago didn't afford many opportunities to develop wilderness skills. But after my divorce from Kevin last year, I had promised myself I would start saying yes to new experiences. Stop playing it safe. Kevin always said I was too cautious, too afraid to step outside my comfort zone. I wanted to prove him wrong, even if only to myself. So when Eliza called with the invitation, I agreed without hesitation. "It'll be fun," she said. "The Badlands have this eerie, almost otherworldly beauty, and there's a section where you can backcountry camp for a few nights. No designated trails, just wilderness." Looking back, I should have asked more questions. We met in Rapid City on August 10th. Marcus picked me up from the airport in his weathered Toyota 4Runner, Eliza beaming from the passenger seat. They looked so happy together. Eliza's wild red curls pulled back in a messy bun, her freckled face flushed with excitement, and Marcus, tall and solid, with the kind of calm confidence that immediately put you at ease. "Cass!" Eliza squealed, jumping out to hug me. "You're really here! I can't believe you agreed to this." "New year, new me," I laughed, hugging her back tightly. It had been almost a year since we'd seen each other in person, and I'd forgotten how much I missed her infectious energy. "Trent's waiting at the campsite," Marcus explained as he loaded my backpack into the trunk. "He went ahead to secure a good spot before we head into the backcountry tomorrow." The drive to the park took about an hour, during which Eliza chattered excitedly about the geological formations we'd be seeing. "The Badlands are basically an enormous fossil bed," she explained. 37 million years of history, just lying there in the rock layers. Ancient rhinos, camels, even saber-toothed cats used to roam here. "No dinosaurs?" I asked. "Wrong time period," she laughed. "But the Native Americans who lived here had plenty of legends about monsters in these lands. The Lakota called this place Makosika, Badlands, for a reason." Marcus glanced at her in the rearview mirror. "Maybe save the scary stories for the campfire, babe." I remember watching the landscape change as we drove, becoming increasingly stark and alien. Rolling prairie giving way to sharply eroded buttes, jagged spires, and deep ravines in shades of rust, cream, and gray. It was beautiful in a desolate way, like looking at the skeleton of the earth itself. We reached the Cedar Pass campground by late afternoon, where we found Trent sitting outside his already assembled tent, whittling a piece of wood with alarming precision. He stood as we approached, a wiry man in his early 30s with a closely cropped beard and piercing blue eyes that seemed to assess everything with military efficiency. "You must be Cassandra," he said, extending a calloused hand. His grip was firm, almost challenging. Just Cass is fine, I replied, trying to match his handshake strength. Trent's an ex-park ranger, Marcus explained. Worked here for 5 years before moving to Colorado. He knows these badlands better than anyone. Trent's mouth twitched slightly. Not better than the locals, he said quietly. Never better than them. There was something in his tone that gave me pause, but Eliza was already organizing our campsite, assigning tasks with her usual efficiency. We spent the evening setting up tents, preparing dinner on portable stoves, and discussing our route for the next day. Trent had mapped out a 3-day loop through Sage Creek Wilderness, a remote section of the park where we could truly disconnect. No trails, minimal signs of human presence, he explained, spreading a topographical map across our folding table. We'll follow the ridgelines here and here, then drop down into this basin where there's a reliable water source. From there, we'll head north through Deer Haven Valley and loop back around through Sage Creek Basin. Any particular wildlife we should be concerned about? I asked. Rattlesnakes mostly, Trent answered without looking up. Bison herds too, but they'll generally leave you alone if you give them space. Mountain lions are around, but rarely seen. What about other people? I pressed. Something about the isolation was starting to make me nervous. Trent finally looked up, those blue eyes locking onto mine. That's why we're going there, Cassandra. To not see other people. Marcus must have sensed my discomfort. It'll be fine, Cass. Trent's done this route multiple times, and we'll have the satellite phone for emergencies. As darkness fell, we gathered around the campfire. The night air was cool, the sky impossibly vast and filled with more stars than I'd ever seen in my life. For a while, we just sat in comfortable silence, watching the flames dance and listening to the distant calls of coyotes. Then, Eliza, never one to let a silence stretch too long, asked Trent if he had any good stories from his ranger days. His expression darkened slightly. Nothing suitable for a campfire the night before a hike. Oh, come on, she prodded. We're all adults here. Give us something good. Any rescues? Missing hikers? Trent took a long pull from his beer before responding. There was one incident, 5 years ago. Family of 4 went missing in the area we're heading to tomorrow. Parents and 2 kids, ages 7 and 9. Marcus shifted uncomfortably. Maybe we should— No, I want to hear it, Eliza interrupted, her eyes gleaming with macabre curiosity. Trent shrugged. Not much to tell. They were experienced hikers, had all the right gear. Father was actually a wilderness survival instructor from Minnesota. They had permits for 5 days of backcountry camping. When they didn't check in at the end, search and rescue went out. And? I prompted when he fell silent. We found their campsite. Everything was there. Tents still set up, food properly stored, no signs of animal attack or struggle. But no people. Not a trace. It was like they just vanished in the middle of whatever they were doing. Coffee pot still on the portable stove. That's impossible, I said. People don't just disappear. In the Badlands, some things don't follow rules, Trent replied cryptically. The Dakota believed there are thin places here, where the barrier between our world and other worlds isn't as solid. Eliza snorted. Now you sound like my crazy Aunt Margaret. Next you'll be telling us about skinwalkers and wendigos. A muscle in Trent's jaw tightened. The locals don't joke about such things. Do they ever joke about anything? Marcus laughed, trying to lighten the mood. Come on, let's get some sleep. Early start tomorrow. As we dispersed to our tents, I caught Trent staring out into the darkness beyond our campsite, his body unnaturally still. He was listening for something, though I couldn't imagine what. That night, I dreamed of endless canyons and a voice calling my name from deep within the earth. Morning came with merciful brightness, chasing away the lingering unease from Trent's story. We broke camp efficiently, redistributing the group gear among our packs. I was relieved to see that Trent seemed more relaxed in the daylight, methodically checking our supplies and going over the route one final time. Remember, he emphasized, We're entering a part of the park with no cellular service and minimal trail markers. Stay together, conserve water, and speak up immediately if you're having any issues." The first few hours of hiking were exhilarating. We followed a faint trail that wound up and along a dramatic ridgeline, offering spectacular views of the eroded landscape below. Eliza was in her element, pointing out different rock layers and occasionally stopping to examine interesting formations. "See how these bands change color," she explained, running her hand along a section of striped rock. "Each one represents a different period of deposition. The darker bands are ancient soils that formed during wetter periods." I was about to ask a question when Trent, who had been walking ahead, suddenly raised his hand in a sharp gesture that clearly meant, "Stop." We froze. "Bison," he said quietly, pointing to a distant slope where several dark shapes were grazing. "We need to give them a wide berth." We altered our course, adding an extra mile to our journey to avoid the animals. By midday, the temperature had risen considerably, and the stark landscape offered little shade. My water supply was depleting faster than I'd anticipated, and despite the breathtaking scenery, I was beginning to question my decision to come on this trip. "How much further to the water source?" I asked during a brief rest, trying to keep the strain out of my voice. Trent consulted his map. "Another 3 miles, but it's mainly downhill from here. We should reach it by mid-afternoon." Marcus gave me an encouraging smile. "Hanging in there, Cass?" "Absolutely," I lied, not wanting to be the weak link. As we continued, the landscape became increasingly surreal. Wind-sculpted spires rose like ancient monuments, and deep canyons cut through the earth like open wounds. Despite my fatigue, I couldn't help feeling a sense of awe and increasing smallness in this vast, primeval world. We reached the promised water source around 3 p.m., a clear stream winding through a protected canyon. While Marcus filtered water for our bottles, Eliza and I soaked our feet in the cool current, and Trent scouted the area for a suitable campsite. He returned looking troubled. "What's wrong?" Marcus asked immediately. "There's someone else out here," Trent said, his voice low. "I found fresh footprints about half a mile upstream. Single person, heavy boot tread, moving in the same direction we're headed." Eliza shrugged. "So? It's a national park. Other people can hike here." "Not many do," Trent countered. "Especially not solo hikers in this section. And there's something else." He hesitated. "The stride length is unusual, inconsistent, like they're limping, or not walking normally." "Maybe they're injured," I suggested. "Shouldn't we try to find them? They might need help." Trent considered this. "We'll set up camp here for tonight. If they're in trouble, they'll likely follow the water source and come to us. If not..." He didn't finish the sentence. We established our campsite in a sheltered area near the stream, surrounded by steep canyon walls that offered protection from the wind. As dusk approached, Marcus and Trent gathered wood for a small fire, while Eliza and I prepared dinner, freeze-dried meals that tasted surprisingly good after a full day of hiking. "So, what do you think of Trent?" Eliza whispered as we worked. "He's intense," I admitted, "but I feel safe with him out here. He clearly knows what he's doing." She nodded. "Marcus says he was in Special Forces before becoming a ranger, though Trent never talks about it. Apparently, something happened during his last year here that made him quit suddenly." "What kind of something?" "No idea. Marcus tried asking once, and Trent shut down completely." Our conversation was interrupted by the men's return with armfuls of firewood. As darkness fell, we again found ourselves circled around the crackling flames, our faces illuminated in the dancing light. The canyon walls created strange acoustics, sometimes amplifying the fire's snaps and pops, other times absorbing all sound in an eerie stillness. "Anyone else notice how quiet it is?" Marcus commented. "No birds, no insects." "They know better," Trent said cryptically. I was about to ask what he meant when a sound echoed from somewhere up the canyon, a dull thud, followed by what might have been a voice, too distant to make out words. We all turned toward the sound. "The other hiker?" Eliza suggested. Trent stood, reaching for his flashlight. "Maybe. I'll check it out." "You shouldn't go alone," Marcus protested. "I'm not going far. Just to the bend in the canyon. If it's someone in trouble, I'll signal with 3 flashes." He patted the holstered hunting knife at his hip and disappeared into the darkness beyond our fire's glow. 20 minutes passed with no sign of him. "This isn't right," Marcus finally said, standing. "I'm going after him." "No," I said firmly, surprising myself. "We shouldn't split up more. Give him until the count of 300. If he's not back, we'll all go together." We counted silently, the tension building with each passing number. At 274, a beam of light appeared at the canyon entrance and Trent emerged, his expression unreadable in the darkness. "Well?" Eliza prompted as he rejoined us. "Nothing," he said shortly. "No sign of anyone." "But we all heard something," I insisted. "Sound carries strangely out here. Could have been a rockfall further up the canyon." None of us were entirely convinced, but exhaustion from the day's hike was setting in, and the warmth of the fire was making my eyelids heavy. We agreed to set watches through the night, a precaution Trent insisted on. I took the first shift, then Marcus, Eliza, and finally Trent for the pre-dawn hours. My watch passed uneventfully, and I woke Marcus for his turn before crawling into my tent. Despite my fatigue, sleep came fitfully. I dreamed of footsteps circling our camp, of eyes watching from the canyon rim above. At one point, I jerked awake, certain I'd heard my name being whispered just outside my tent. Cassandra. I lay perfectly still, listening intently, but heard only the gentle rustle of wind through the canyon. Morning revealed nothing amiss in our camp, though Trent seemed more on edge than before. As we packed up, I noticed him examining the ground around our tents with careful attention. "Find anything?" I asked, approaching him. He straightened quickly. "No," he said, too sharply, then moderating his tone. "No tracks. Let's get moving. I want to reach Deer Haven by midday." The day's hike took us out of the canyon and across more exposed terrain, a moonscape of eroded hoodoos and deep ravines that required careful navigation. The sun beat down mercilessly, and despite our early start, heat exhaustion became a real concern. Trent pushed a relentless pace, stopping only briefly for water and energy bars. "Hey, can we take 5? Eliza finally called out, her normally boundless energy flagging. "I need to adjust my pack." Trent reluctantly agreed, and we all sank gratefully to the ground in the meager shade of a large rock formation. As I gulped water, I noticed Marcus studying the map with a furrowed brow. "Everything okay?" I asked. He lowered his voice. "I think we're off course. We should have hit that distinctive butte by now." He pointed to a formation marked on the map. Before I could respond, a sound cut through the still air, a drawn-out, keening wail that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. It was unlike anything I'd ever heard, not quite human, not quite animal, rising and falling in pitch before abruptly cutting off. We all froze. "What the hell was that?" Marcus whispered. Trent's face had drained of color. Without answering, he pulled out his compass and swore under his breath. "What?" Eliza demanded. "The compass is spinning," he said, his voice tight. "It can't find north." "That's impossible," she scoffed, reaching for it. But her expression changed as she watched the needle rotate aimlessly. "There must be magnetic deposits in these rocks. My departmental field trips ran into this all the time." "Right," Trent said, but he didn't sound convinced. "Everyone check your phones. GPS." We all pulled out our devices. Mine was dead, despite having been fully charged that morning. Marcus and Eliza reported the same. "This isn't normal," I said, a cold feeling settling in my stomach. "We stick to the original plan," Trent decided after a moment. "Head north, or what should be north, for another 2 miles. We'll hit the valley or a recognizable landmark eventually." But as the afternoon wore on, nothing looked familiar, not even to Trent. The landscape seemed to shift around us, landmarks appearing and disappearing in ways that defied logic. The shadows lengthened at an accelerated rate, as if time itself was behaving strangely. Twice more we heard that chilling wail, each time closer than before. "We need to find shelter before dark," Trent finally announced. "There's a formation up ahead that might work." The formation turned out to be a shallow cave set into a cliff face, barely more than an indentation in the rock, but it would protect us from 3 sides at least. As we approached, I noticed odd markings carved into the stone around the entrance. Symbols I didn't recognize, arranged in a deliberate pattern. "Are those petroglyphs?" I asked, pointing. Trent examined them briefly. "No, these are more recent." His jaw tightened. "Let's find somewhere else." "It's getting dark," Marcus protested, "and those clouds don't look friendly." He was right. While we'd been hiking, storm clouds had gathered on the horizon, and the wind was picking up, carrying the scent of rain. "Fine," Trent relented, "but we sleep in shifts again. No one goes anywhere alone." We set up camp with an efficiency born of growing unease. No one suggested a fire, though the temperature was dropping rapidly. Instead, we huddled together at the back of the shallow cave, sharing energy bars and beef jerky in lieu of a proper meal. None of us had much appetite anyway. "Tomorrow, we head straight back to where we started," Trent decided. "Forget the loop. Something's not right here." "You think?" Eliza said sarcastically. "Our phones are dead, compasses don't work, and we're being stalked by whatever's making that god-awful noise." "We're not being stalked," Marcus said firmly, though he didn't sound convinced. "Actually," Trent said quietly, "I think we are." We all stared at him. "That sound," he began, then stopped abruptly as a distant rumble of thunder rolled across the landscape. "I heard it once before, 5 years ago, right before that family disappeared." A chill ran through me that had nothing to do with the dropping temperature. "What aren't you telling us?" I demanded. Trent looked away, his profile sharp against the dimming light outside. "The official report said the family was never found. That's not entirely accurate. We found the father 3 days later, wandering near Sheepa Mountain Table 40 miles from their campsite." "Alive?" Eliza whispered. "Technically, but he wasn't himself anymore. He couldn't speak, couldn't tell us what happened or where his family was, just kept making this sound." Trent imitated a rhythmic clicking with his tongue. "The medics sedated him for transport. I rode with him in the helicopter. Right before we landed, he grabbed my wrist, strength like you wouldn't believe, and spoke the only coherent thing anyone ever got from him." Thunder crashed again, closer this time. In the brief silence that followed, Trent's words hung in the air. He said, "It wears their faces." A flash of lightning illuminated the cave entrance, followed immediately by a deafening thunderclap. The storm was directly overhead now. Rain began to lash down in sheets, creating a curtain of water across the cave opening. "What happened to him?" Marcus asked, his voice barely audible over the storm. "Committed to a psychiatric facility in Rapid City. Killed himself 3 weeks later. Bit through his own wrists." Trent's face was grim. "That's why I quit. Couldn't shake the feeling that we missed something, that we left something out there." The storm's ferocity increased, wind driving the rain sideways into our shelter. We had to move deeper into the cave, which seemed to extend further back than I'd initially realized. "Did anyone check how far this goes?" I asked, suddenly concerned. "It's just a shallow overhang," Trent assured me. "I looked when we arrived." But as another lightning flash illuminated our surroundings, I could clearly see that the cave continued into darkness, a narrow passage leading deeper into the cliff. "Trent," I said carefully, "that wasn't there before." He followed my gaze, his expression hardening. "Everyone pack up, now. We're leaving." "In this storm," Eliza protested, "we'll be soaked in seconds. Better wet than—" He didn't finish the sentence because at that moment, we heard it again. That keening wail, so close now it seemed to reverberate within the cave itself. And then, impossibly, A voice called from the darkness of the passage. "Help, please." It was a child's voice. Marcus jumped to his feet. "There's someone back there." Trent grabbed his arm. "That's not a child." "We don't know that," Marcus argued, pulling free. "It could be a lost kid, caught in the same weird magnetic field or whatever is messing with our equipment." The voice called again, weaker this time. "Please. Hurt." Before anyone could stop him, Marcus had grabbed his flashlight and was moving toward the passage. Eliza scrambled after him, leaving Trent and me staring at each other in horror. "Stay here," he ordered, drawing his hunting knife. "If I'm not back in 5 minutes, get out and head east. The storm will clear by morning." "I'm not splitting up," I insisted, grabbing my own flashlight. "We go together or not at all." He looked like he wanted to argue, but nodded tersely. Together, we followed the bobbing lights of Marcus and Eliza into the passage. The narrow corridor twisted downward at a steep angle, the rough stone walls pressing in from both sides. The air grew noticeably colder, with a damp, organic smell that reminded me of mushrooms and decay. Our flashlight beams cut through darkness so complete it seemed to swallow the light. We caught up to Marcus and Eliza where the passage opened into a larger chamber, their flashlights scanning the space frantically. "I heard it right here," Marcus insisted. "A child, crying for help." Trent's light revealed crude drawings on the chamber walls, stick figures with elongated limbs, spirals, and more of those strange symbols we'd seen at the entrance. "These aren't Dakota," Eliza murmured, her archaeologist's curiosity momentarily overriding her fear. "They don't match any indigenous art style I've studied." "We need to leave," Trent said firmly. "Now." That's when we heard the shuffling footsteps behind us, from the direction of the cave entrance. We turned as one, flashlights converging on the passage we'd just traversed. A figure stood there, human in general shape, but wrong in ways my mind initially couldn't process. It was tall. Too tall for the low ceiling, forcing it to stoop unnaturally. Its limbs were disproportionately long and jointed in extra places. But worst of all was its face, or rather, faces. The creature's head seemed to shift between different human visages, never settling on one, like a twisted slideshow of stolen identities. Eliza screamed. The sound jolted us from our paralysis. "Run!" Trent shouted, pushing me toward a second passage I hadn't noticed before. "Go! Go!" We fled deeper into the cave system, blind with terror, our flashlights casting wild, jumping shadows as we ran. Behind us, that terrible wailing cry echoed off the walls, joined now by the sound of too many limbs scuttling across stone. The passage split, then split again. We made random choices. No plan beyond getting away from the thing behind us. At some point, I realized Eliza was no longer with us. "Stop!" I gasped, pulling at Marcus's sleeve. "Eliza! We lost her!" The three of us froze, listening. Nothing but our own ragged breathing and distant water drips. "We have to go back," Marcus said immediately, his face ashen. "No," Trent grabbed him. "It's suicide. She's my girlfriend. And that thing will be wearing her face if you go back there," Trent hissed. "We need to find a way out first, then get help." Their argument was cut short by a scream. Eliza's voice, unmistakable, echoing from somewhere in the labyrinth. Then silence, more absolute than before. Marcus broke free from Trent's grasp and bolted back the way we'd come. Trent swore viciously but didn't follow. "We can't just leave them," I pleaded. "We're not," he said grimly, "but we need a better plan than running blindly." He swept his flashlight around the chamber we were in, revealing another narrow opening. Cave systems like this usually have multiple exits. Water flows out somewhere. We followed the new passage, which sloped gently downward. The sound of running water grew louder, giving us hope. After what seemed like hours but was probably minutes, we emerged into a larger cavern with a small underground stream flowing across the floor and disappearing into a crevice too small for a human to follow. "See if you can get any signal on your phone," Trent suggested, though we both knew it was futile. Still, I pulled out my dead device and was shocked to see it power on. "Trent, it's working." He was at my side instantly. "Try calling 911. I did, but the call failed to connect. However, I did have enough signal to see a text message that had somehow come through, from Eliza's number, sent just minutes ago. "Help us. Cave behind waterfall. Not what it seems." I showed Trent the message. His face paled. "There's no waterfall in these caves." As if in response, we heard it then, the distant rush of falling water coming from yet another passage leading off the chamber. "Could she have found another way out?" I asked hopefully. Trent's expression was grim. "Or something's using her phone to lure us deeper." "We can't just abandon them," I insisted. After a moment's hesitation, he nodded. "But we go carefully, and at the first sign of that thing, we run. Understand?" The new passage was easier to navigate, widening as we followed the sound of rushing water. The air grew misty, confirming that we were approaching some kind of waterfall. Hope began to build. Perhaps there was indeed a way out. The passage opened into a breathtaking underground grotto. A shaft of daylight penetrated from some opening far above, illuminating a scene that might have been beautiful under other circumstances. A thin waterfall cascading from the ceiling into a clear pool below, surrounded by strange, pale formations that resembled organic structures more than typical stalactites. And standing at the edge of the pool was Marcus, his back to us. "Marcus," I called in relief. He turned slowly, too slowly. Even from a distance, I could see something was terribly wrong. His movements were jerky, puppet-like, and his eyes— God, his eyes were black voids with pinpricks of light deep within, like distant stars. "Run," Trent whispered so quietly I barely heard him. Not Marcus opened his mouth and that keening wail emerged, echoing off the chamber walls. From the pool, disturbances appeared in the water, things rising from below. We ran. Behind us, multiple sets of footsteps gave pursuit. The passages seemed different now, narrower, twisting in impossible ways. Several times I was certain we'd made a wrong turn, but somehow we kept finding new routes, as if the cave itself was changing around us. "There," Trent suddenly shouted, pointing ahead where a faint grayish light indicated a potential exit. We burst out into the storm-washed night, rain still falling but less intensely than before. We were on a ledge partway up a cliff face, the badlands stretching out below us in the darkness. "Down!" Trent commanded, already searching for a path. "We need to get as far from here as possible before dawn." I followed him numbly as he picked his way down the treacherous slope, my mind still trying to process what I'd seen. Marcus's empty eyes, those things rising from the pool. Eliza, absent but somehow able to text. Dawn found us miles away, huddled in the shelter of an eroded overhang as the storm finally broke. Neither of us had spoken for hours. What was there to say? Trent finally broke the silence. "The Rangers won't believe us." "We have to try. We can't just leave them there." "They're already gone," he said flatly. Whatever was wearing Marcus's face. "Your friends weren't there anymore?" I wanted to argue, but deep down, I knew he was right. Whatever had happened in that cave, Marcus and Eliza, as we knew them, were gone. It took us another full day of hiking to reach a ranger station. We told them a sanitized version of events, that we'd been separated from our friends in the storm, that they might be lost or injured in the Sage Creek area. Search and rescue operations began immediately, but I knew they wouldn't find anything. Or worse, they would find something wearing our friends' faces. 3 days later, the search was officially suspended. No trace of Marcus or Eliza was ever found. Their families still call me sometimes, asking if I remember any other details, any clue that might help locate them. I've stopped answering their calls. What could I possibly say? Trent disappeared too, not physically but in every other way. Last I heard, he'd gone deep into the mountains of Colorado, living off-grid in some remote cabin, running from memories, just like me. I moved to Seattle after that, as far from the Badlands as I could reasonably get. I changed my phone number, deleted my social media accounts, started therapy, tried to rebuild some semblance of a normal life. But normalcy is an illusion once you've glimpsed what lurks beneath. Last week, something happened that compelled me to finally write this account. I received a package at my apartment, no return address, no note inside. Just a weathered, dirt-stained journal that I immediately recognized as Eliza's. The one she'd been writing in during our trip, documenting the geological formations we encountered. I should have burned it. Instead, I opened it. Most pages contained exactly what you'd expect. Eliza's neat handwriting detailing rock compositions and formations, rough sketches of interesting features, timestamps, and coordinates. But the final entry, dated the night she disappeared, was different. The handwriting was erratic, the pressure so hard it tore through the paper in places. "It's watching us. It's been watching since we arrived. Trent knows more than he's saying. The cave isn't a cave, it's a mouth. God help us, it's a mouth. And we're already inside it. If anyone finds this, stay away from Sage Creek. The things in the water aren't reflections. They're windows. And he stands behind all of them. The one, the Dakota, called." The entry ended mid-sentence with a violent stroke that dragged across the page. That night, for the first time since I moved to Seattle, I woke to the sound of my phone receiving a text message. And even though I know it's impossible, her phone was never recovered, her account closed, the notification showed the same name: Eliza. This time, my trembling finger opened it. 3 words: "Come home, Cass." Beneath it, a image, a perfect, untouched campsite in a familiar canyon, 4 tents, a coffee pot on a portable stove, and standing just at the edge of the frame, a figure with my face, smiling too widely, blinking too little, staring directly at the camera. I burned the journal that night, destroyed my phone, started writing this account, because I know now why the searches never found our friends, why that family vanished years ago, why locals avoid certain areas after dark. There are thin places in this world, cracks where something else seeps through. The Dakota were right to name those lands Makosika. Badlands indeed, and whatever came through has learned new tricks. It doesn't just wear their faces anymore, it wears their voices, their handwriting, their memories. It can reach across miles, across years. If you ever find yourself in Sage Creek Wilderness when the sun is setting and the shadows grow long, and you hear a voice calling for help, any voice, even one you recognize, run. Run and don't look back, because it wears their faces, it knows their secrets, and it's patient, very, very patient, and it's coming for me next. My name is Rebecca Warner. I'm 34 years old, and this happened in August of 2023. It was supposed to be the perfect wilderness getaway, a chance for 3 overworked nurses to decompress after the hellish years of the pandemic. Just me, my colleague Jenna Holbrook, and our supervisor Melissa Chen, hiking through the Black Hills of South Dakota, exploring territory none of us had seen before. We'd been planning it for months, poring over maps of Custer State Park and the surrounding wilderness areas, plotting routes that would take us off the beaten path. "We deserve this," Melissa had said as we packed our gear the night before setting out. Melissa, always collected, always in control. At 42, she had more backcountry experience than either Jenna or me, having grown up in Montana before moving east for nursing school. After everything we've been through, we need to remember what peace feels like. Jenna had nodded enthusiastically, her honey blonde ponytail bouncing. Just imagine, no beeping monitors, no call buttons, no fluorescent lights, just trees and sky. At 29, Jenna was the youngest of our trio, perpetually optimistic despite everything she'd witnessed in the ICU. I remember smiling, feeling a weight lift from my shoulders at the mere thought of escaping our sterile hospital environment. After 3 years of death and disease and PPE that left permanent marks on our faces, the wilderness seemed like salvation. None of us could have imagined what waited for us in those remote woods. We started our hike on a Tuesday morning in perfect weather, entering Custer State Park through a less-traveled trailhead near the ghost town of Spokane. Our plan was to follow a loop that would take us deep into the wilderness area beyond the regular tourist paths, camping for 4 nights before returning to civilization. The first day was everything we'd hoped for. The late summer wildflowers painted the meadows in explosions of color, and the ponderosa pines created cathedral-like spaces as we climbed higher into the hills. We spotted deer, a distant bison herd, and even a red-tailed hawk that swooped so close we could hear the whisper of its wings. "This is just what the doctor ordered," Jenna said, spreading her arms wide at an overlook that revealed miles of undulating forest and distant rocky spires. Melissa took deep, deliberate breaths beside me. "The air here is medicine," she agreed, her usually tense shoulders visibly relaxing. That night we made camp in a small clearing surrounded by towering pines. As darkness fell, we built a fire, roasted marshmallows, and shared stories, not of work or patience or trauma, but of childhood adventures and dreams deferred. For the first time in years, I felt completely present, unburdened by the past or anxious about the future. But as the fire died down and Melissa and Jenna drifted off to sleep in their tents, I remained awake, staring up at the stars visible through the mesh of my tent roof. Something felt off. Not wrong, exactly, but unsettled, like the pause before a thunderclap. I attributed it to being unused to the profound silence of the wilderness. In the hospital, there was always noise, machines humming, intercoms paging, feet shuffling on linoleum. Here, the silence had weight and presence, until it was broken by a sound I couldn't immediately identify. It was distant but distinctive, a rhythmic tapping, like wood against wood. Talk, talk, talk. Then silence. Then again, talk, talk, talk. I sat up, straining to hear. It wasn't an animal sound that I recognized. Too regular, too deliberate. Talk, talk, talk. Closer now. Or was that my imagination? I unzipped my tent as quietly as possible and peered out. The embers of our fire cast just enough light to make out the shapes of the other tents. But beyond our small clearing was absolute darkness. I fumbled for my headlamp and switched it on, scanning the tree line. Nothing moved in the feeble beam of light, but the tapping continued, now seeming to come from a different direction. Talk, talk, talk. I slipped out of my tent and stood, turning slowly, trying to pinpoint the source. "Hello?" I called softly, not wanting to wake my friends if this was nothing. The tapping stopped abruptly. Then came a new sound, a low, melodic humming. A woman's voice, but distant and strange, the tune unfamiliar yet somehow disquieting. It rose and fell in a pattern that made the hair on my arms stand up. "Is someone there?" I called, louder this time. The humming stopped. The forest fell silent again, but now it was a charged silence, expectant. "Rebecca?" Melissa's voice came from her tent. "What's going on?" "I heard something," I said, still scanning the darkness beyond our camp. "Someone tapping, then humming. Did you hear it?" Melissa emerged from her tent, her own headlamp creating bizarre shadows as she moved. "Probably just a hiker passing by," she said, but she sounded uncertain. "At this hour, miles from any marked trail?" Melissa shrugged. "Sound carries strangely out here. Could be someone camping by the creek down there." We both knew there was no creek nearby, but I didn't press the point. "Maybe you're right," I conceded. We stood listening for a few more minutes, but the forest remained silent. Eventually, Melissa patted my shoulder. "Try to get some sleep. We've got a tough climb tomorrow." I nodded and returned to my tent, but sleep eluded me. I lay awake for hours, listening, waiting for the tapping to return. It didn't, but just as dawn began to lighten the sky, I heard something else. A whisper, so close it could have been inside my tent. "Rebecca." I bolted upright, heart hammering. "Who's there?" I hissed. Silence. I unzipped the tent and looked out. The clearing was empty except for our tents. Melissa and Jenna still appeared to be sleeping. I told myself I'd dreamed it, that the stress of the past years had followed me into the wilderness, but deep down, I knew better. Something had called my name. When I mentioned it over breakfast, both Melissa and Jenna looked concerned. "You didn't sleep well," Jenna suggested. "First night in a strange place. Your brain plays tricks." "I know what I heard," I insisted. Melissa frowned, stirring her instant coffee. Was it a man's voice or a woman's? The question caught me off guard. "A woman's," I said. "Why?" Melissa hesitated, then shook her head. "No reason, just curious." But there was something in her expression, a flicker of recognition, quickly suppressed. That made me uneasy. "Melissa, do you know something about this area?" "Just old stories," she said dismissively. "Every forest has them. We should break camp if we want to reach Harney Lake by sunset." I wanted to press her further, but Jenna was already packing up her tent, and Melissa made it clear the conversation was over. We set off under a cloudless sky, following a faint game trail that wound deeper into the hills. The hiking was more strenuous than the previous day, with steep climbs and descents that tested our endurance. By midday, we had traveled several miles from our first campsite, ascending into an area of the Black Hills that felt increasingly remote. The forest changed character as we climbed, the trees more gnarled, the undergrowth denser. Fewer wildflowers brightened the landscape, replaced by twisted shrubs and pale fungi that clustered on rotting logs. "Are we still on the right track?" Jenna asked during a water break. She was studying our map with a furrowed brow. "I don't see this ridge we're on." Melissa took the map from her. "We should be here," she said, pointing to a contour line. "Harney Lake should be just beyond that next peak." I peered at the map. Something didn't add up. The terrain around us didn't match what was depicted. Maybe we took a wrong turn at that last junction. "No," Melissa said firmly. "I know exactly where we are. The map is just old, and these game trails shift over time." We continued climbing, but my unease grew with each step. The forest had fallen strangely silent. No birds calling, no squirrels chattering, not even the buzz of insects. And the air had changed, too, becoming heavy and still, with an underlying scent I couldn't identify. Something earthy and organic, like decaying vegetation, but with a sharper note beneath it. We rounded a bend in the trail and stopped short. Before us stood a massive dead tree unlike any I'd seen before. Its trunk was gnarled and split, forming what eerily resembled a hunched human figure. Hanging from its twisted branches were dozens of small objects that clattered gently in the faint breeze. "What the hell is that?" Jenna whispered. We approached cautiously. The hanging objects were revealed to be small animal bones, feathers, and smooth rocks, each with strange symbols carved into them. At the base of the tree lay a circle of larger stones arranged in a pattern. "It's a marker," Melissa said quietly, "or a warning." "A warning for what?" I asked. Melissa didn't answer directly. "We should go around," she said. "Give it a wide berth." "Is this some kind of Blair Witch thing?" Jenna asked, trying for levity but failing to hide her nervousness. "Someone's idea of a prank?" "It's not a prank," Melissa said flatly. "Let's keep moving. Harney Lake can't be far now." We skirted around the dead tree, careful not to disturb any of the hanging ornaments. As we passed, I could have sworn I heard that soft tapping sound again. Talk, talk, talk. Coming from the tree itself, though nothing visibly moved. The trail beyond the tree grew fainter, more difficult to follow. The landscape became increasingly disorienting, with rock formations that seemed to shift in my peripheral vision and trees that bent at impossible angles. The sun, which had been directly overhead, now appeared to be west of us, then south, then west again. as if the compass points themselves were rotating. "Does anyone else feel like we're walking in circles?" Jenna asked, her voice tight with anxiety. I checked my phone's GPS, but the screen showed only a flashing "no signal" message where the map should have been. Even more concerning, my fully charged battery was now at 17%. "My phone's dying," I reported. "How's yours?" Jenna pulled hers out. "Dead, completely. That's weird. I charged it last night." Melissa didn't even check hers. "Let's focus on finding water. We can figure out our exact location once we're settled for the night." But hours passed, and we found no lake. The forest grew denser, the light dimmer as the sun began to set behind the hills. We had been hiking for over 8 hours, covering what should have been only a 5-hour journey. "We need to make camp," I finally insisted as dusk gathered around us. "It's not safe to keep hiking in the dark." Reluctantly, Melissa agreed. We found a small clearing, smaller than ideal, hemmed in closely by looming pines, but it would have to do. As we set up our tents, I noticed Melissa scanning the surrounding forest with an intensity that heightened my unease. "Melissa," I said quietly while Jenna was occupied with her tent, "what aren't you telling us about this place?" She met my eyes for a long moment. "There are stories about this part of the Black Hills," she finally said. "Old stories from the Dakota and newer ones from settlers, about a woman who lives deep in the woods." "A woman?" I remembered the humming, the whisper of my name. Melissa nodded. "They call her Agnes Whitewood. Supposedly, she was a settler's wife back in the 1880s. Her husband was a trapper who built a cabin in these hills, far from anyone else. The story goes that one harsh winter, he didn't return from checking his trap lines. Agnes waited and waited, slowly running out of food. When they found her in the spring, she was still alive, but changed. Changed how?" Melissa lowered her voice further. "They say she had survived by making a deal with something that lived in these woods, something older than the hills themselves. She learned its secrets, its magic, became something other than human." A chill ran through me despite the warm evening. "And people still see her, after all this time?" Hikers report encounters. A woman in old-fashioned clothes, singing or humming. Strange arrangements of stones and bones. People who stray off the main trails and get disoriented, walking for hours without reaching their destination. Melissa glanced around the darkening forest. "Most of the stories end with people finding their way out eventually, but not all of them," I finished for her. "Not all of them," she agreed. "Hey, what are you two whispering about?" Jenna called as she finished securing her tent. "Just discussing tomorrow's route," Melissa answered smoothly. "Let's get a fire going before it's completely dark." But despite our best efforts, the fire refused to catch properly. The flames struggled weakly, casting barely enough light to see each other's faces despite the dry kindling and Melissa's expertise. And the smoke, it didn't rise naturally but seemed to hang in the air, forming shapes that my mind kept trying to resolve into a human figure. We ate a cold dinner and retreated to our tents earlier than the night before. Despite my exhaustion, sleep once again eluded me. The forest was too quiet, too still. No owls hooted, no nighttime creatures rustled in the undergrowth. Just a profound, waiting silence, until the tapping began again. Talk, talk, talk. I lay rigid in my sleeping bag, listening as the sound moved around our camp, circling slowly. Talk, talk, talk. Near Melissa's tent, talk, talk, talk. By the dead fire. Talk, talk, talk. Just outside my own tent. Then the humming started, the same eerie melody I'd heard the night before, but closer now, clear enough that I could almost make out words woven into the tune. I wanted to call out to Melissa or Jenna to see if they heard it too, but fear froze my voice in my throat. The humming grew louder, more insistent, and with it came a smell that seeped through the fabric of my tent, The same decay and something else odor I'd noticed earlier, but stronger now, overwhelming. Then silence fell again, so abruptly it felt like a physical pressure. I held my breath, straining to hear. "Rebecca," came the whisper, directly above me. "I've been waiting for you." I screamed then, a raw sound that tore from my chest. In an instant, headlamp beams cut through the darkness as Melissa and Jenna emerged from their tents. "Rebecca, what is it?" Melissa demanded, rushing to my tent and unzipping it from outside. I scrambled out, nearly knocking her over. "Someone was here, right outside my tent. She said my name." Jenna swept her light across our campsite. "There's no one here, Beck." "She was here," I insisted, my voice breaking. "I heard her. She knew my name." Melissa gripped my shoulders, her face grave in the harsh light of the headlamps. "What exactly did you hear?" I told them about the tapping, the humming, the whisper. As I spoke, Jenna's eyes widened, but Melissa's expression hardened into something like resignation. "We need to leave," she said. "First light, we pack up and head back the way we came." "But what about the rest of our trip?" Jenna asked. "It's not safe," Melissa said flatly. "I should never have brought us here. I thought the stories were just stories." None of us slept much that night. We sat huddled together by our meager fire, taking turns keeping watch. Nothing more happened. No tapping, no humming, no whispers, but the feeling of being observed never left. Morning came with a heavy mist that clung to the trees and reduced visibility to mere yards. We packed quickly, eager to put this place behind us. But when we tried to retrace our steps, we found that the trail we'd followed was no longer visible. "This doesn't make sense," Jenna said, panic edging into her voice. "We came from that direction, through that stand of pines. But where there should have been a gap between trees, there was now only dense underbrush, as if no one had passed that way in years." "Let's check the compass," I suggested. Melissa pulled out her compass and frowned. The needle spun lazily, refusing to settle on any direction. "That's impossible," she muttered. We picked a direction that seemed right and started walking, but the forest around us grew only more unfamiliar. Twisted trees gave way to strange rock formations. The mist thickened until we could barely see each other, though we stayed close together, linked by our shared fear. Hours passed. Our water ran low. The terrain grew steadily more difficult. Steep slopes, hidden drop-offs, tangles of thorny brush that tore at our clothing and skin. "We need to stop and assess," Melissa finally said as we emerged into a small rocky clearing. "This isn't working. We're just getting more lost." We sank down on a fallen log, exhaustion and dread weighing heavily on us. The mist swirled around us, occasionally parting to reveal glimpses of unfamiliar landscape. "Could we be near a road?" Jenna asked hopefully. "If we just pick a direction and stick to it, we have to hit civilization eventually, right?" "In theory," Melissa agreed. "But this fog, it's disorienting. And these hills are vast. We could walk for days without hitting a road." I took a sip from my nearly empty water bottle, trying to think rationally. "We need water soon. Maybe we should try to find higher ground, get above this mist, and see if we can spot any landmarks." Melissa nodded slowly. "That makes sense. If we can." A sharp crack interrupted her, the unmistakable sound of a branch breaking nearby. We froze, listening. Talk, talk, talk. The sound came from the mist-shrouded trees to our left, then again from our right. Talk, talk, talk. "Hello?" Jenna called, her voice trembling. "Is someone there?" The humming began, now coming from all around us as if multiple voices were singing the same eerie melody from different directions. "We need to move," Melissa said urgently. "Now!" We grabbed our packs and started to run, choosing a direction at random. The mist swirled and eddied around us, sometimes thinning enough to see a few yards ahead, sometimes thickening until I could barely make out Jenna's form right in front of me. The humming followed us, always just behind, sometimes seeming to come from directly overhead. My lungs burned, my legs ached, but terror drove me forward. Then Jenna screamed. Her form disappeared from in front of me. "Jenna!" I called, skidding to a stop at the edge of what I now saw was a steep ravine. Below, perhaps 15 feet down, Jenna lay on her back, her leg bent at an unnatural angle. "I can't move," she called up, her voice tight with pain. "My leg. I think it's broken." Melissa and I scrambled down to her, sending small avalanches of loose rock cascading around us. Up close, the injury was clearly severe, a compound fracture, the bone visibly distorting the fabric of her hiking pants. "We need to splint this," Melissa said, immediately shifting into nurse mode. "Then figure out how to get her out of here." We worked quickly, using trekking poles and strips torn from a spare shirt to create a makeshift splint. Jenna bit her lip until it bled, stifling her cries as we manipulated her injured leg. "How are we going to get her up that slope?" I whispered to Melissa as we finished. Melissa surveyed the ravine. "I don't think we can, not without making the injury worse. We need to follow the ravine, see if there's an easier way out somewhere downstream." The light was already beginning to fade, another day almost gone. The thought of spending another night in these woods, now with Jenna injured, filled me with dread. "Let's try to find shelter for the night," Melissa suggested. "We can reassess in the morning." We helped Jenna to her feet, or foot, rather, and supported her between us as we picked our way carefully along the bottom of the ravine. The walls rose steep on either side, and the sky above had turned a threatening gray. "It's going to rain," Jenna said through gritted teeth. "We need to find cover." We had gone perhaps a quarter mile when the ravine widened, and there, nestled against the far wall, stood a cabin. It was old, built of rough-hewn logs darkened by time and weather. A small porch sagged across the front, and a stone chimney rose from the far end. No light showed from the single visible window, no smoke from the chimney. "That can't be real," I whispered. "It's real," Melissa said grimly, "and it's our only option right now." Rain began to fall as we approached the cabin, fat drops quickly turning to a steady downpour. By the time we reached the porch, we were soaked through and shivering. The door was unlatched and swung open at Melissa's touch, revealing a single-room interior. It was sparsely furnished, a rough wooden table with a single chair, a narrow bed in one corner, a stone fireplace with an iron cooking pot hanging from a hook. Everything was covered in a thick layer of dust, but otherwise, the cabin appeared to have been abandoned only recently, not a century ago. "This has to be a ranger cabin or something," Jenna said as we helped her to the bed, "some kind of emergency shelter." But I knew better. The construction was too old, the furnishings too antiquated. No electric lights, no modern conveniences of any kind, and on the table, barely visible beneath the dust, lay a set of small animal bones arranged in a pattern identical to what we'd seen hanging from the dead tree. "We shouldn't be here," I said. "We don't have a choice," Melissa replied, already kneeling at the fireplace. "Jenna needs warmth and rest, and we're all exhausted." She managed to get a fire going which cast wavering light across the cabin's interior. In its illumination, I noticed more details: a shelf of glass jars containing unidentifiable substances, bundles of dried herbs hanging from the rafters, and scratched into the logs of the far wall, a symbol that matched one of the carvings on the bones at the tree. "Melissa," I said quietly, "this is her cabin, isn't it? Agnes Whitewood's." Melissa didn't answer immediately, but her silence was confirmation enough. "Who's Agnes Whitewood?" Jenna asked from the bed, her face pale with pain and fear. I explained what Melissa had told me the night before, watching Jenna's expression shift from skepticism to horror. "So you're saying we're trapped in some kind of witch's cabin?" she asked when I'd finished. "That's insane." "I don't know what she was," Melissa said, poking at the fire, "but this area has always had a reputation. I just never believed it was real until now." "Then why did you bring us here?" I demanded, anger suddenly flaring through my fear. Melissa looked up, her face haggard in the firelight. I didn't know we'd end up here specifically. I wanted to see the area, yes. I've been fascinated by the stories since I was a kid. But I never believed. Her voice trailed off as a new sound cut through the drumming of rain on the roof. The now familiar talk, 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 this time coming from directly overhead. We all looked up. Again. Talk, talk, talk. Then a scraping sound as if something was being dragged across the roof. "It's just a branch," Jenna said without conviction. "The wind." But there was no wind, and the sound was too regular, too deliberate to be anything natural. It moved across the roof, then down the wall, circling the cabin. Talk, talk, talk on one wall. Talk, talk, talk on another. Then silence. We stared at the door, barely breathing. The fire crackled, sending sparks up the chimney. Rain pattered on the roof, but otherwise there was only silence, until footsteps creaked on the porch. Slow, heavy steps approaching the door. The latch lifted on its own, and the door swung open to reveal a figure silhouetted against the night. She was tall and gaunt, dressed in a long skirt and high-necked blouse of a style not worn for over a century. Her gray hair hung loose around a face that was deeply lined, yet strangely ageless. In one hand, she carried a gnarled walking stick that ended in a knot of wood, the source of the tapping sound. "You've come at last," she said, her voice like dry leaves rustling. "I've been waiting so long." She stepped into the cabin, and the door swung shut behind her without her touching it. Water dripped from her clothes, but she appeared unbothered by the rain or cold. "Who are you?" Melissa asked, though we all knew the answer. "You know who I am," the woman replied, her pale eyes fixing on Melissa. "You've been speaking my name, calling to me." "Agnes Whitewood," Melissa whispered. The woman, Agnes, smiled, revealing teeth that were too sharp, too numerous to be human. "Yes, and you are Melissa Chen, and Rebecca Warner, and Jenna Holbrook." She gestured to each of us in turn. "I know all your names. I've known them for a very long time. What do you want from us?" I managed to ask. Agnes moved to the table and set down her walking stick. "Want? Nothing you haven't already offered. Your curiosity, your fear, your companionship." She looked directly at me. "It gets so lonely in these woods." "We didn't offer anything," Jenna protested from the bed. "We were just hiking. We got lost." Agnes laughed, a sound like bones rattling. "No one gets lost in my woods by accident. You were called here." She turned to Melissa. "Especially you. You've been listening to my call for years, haven't you? Even before you brought your friends to me." Melissa shook her head, but her denial lacked conviction. "I just heard stories. Stories I made sure would reach you," Agnes said. "Little breadcrumbs to lead you home." A horrible suspicion dawned on me. "Melissa," I said slowly, "did you know? Did you bring us here on purpose?" "No," Melissa protested, but her eyes slid away from mine. "I mean, I wanted to see if the stories were true, but I never thought—" "You never thought I was real," Agnes finished for her. "Few do, until they're standing before me. But you hoped, didn't you? Deep down, you hoped." She moved closer to Melissa, reaching out one long-fingered hand to touch her cheek. "You've always felt it, that you don't quite belong in the world of men, that you're meant for something older." Melissa didn't pull away from the touch. Instead, to my horror, she leaned into it, her eyes closing momentarily. "Don't listen to her, Melissa," I urged. "Whatever she's promising, it's a lie." Agnes's head snapped toward me, her movements unnaturally quick. "I never lie, Rebecca Warner. Unlike your friend here, who brought you into my woods knowing the legends, knowing the risks." "Is that true?" Jenna asked, struggling to sit up straighter on the bed. "Did you know what might happen?" Melissa's face crumpled. "I didn't believe it," she insisted. "Not really. I thought they were just stories. Ghost stories to scare tourists." But you wanted them to be true, Agnes said softly. Part of you has always wanted that. Why else have you been dreaming of me since you were a child? Why else do you recognize my song? To demonstrate, Agnes began to hum, the same eerie melody we'd been hearing in the woods. And, to my shock and horror, Melissa began to hum along, her voice blending with Agnes's in perfect harmony. "Stop it," I shouted, breaking the spell. Melissa blinked rapidly as if waking from a trance. "What's happening to me?" she whispered. Agnes smiled again, cruel and knowing. "You're remembering who you really are. What blood runs in your veins." "What is she talking about?" I demanded. Melissa looked at me with tears in her eyes. "My grandmother, she was from here, from the Black Hills. She used to tell me stories about a woman in the woods who taught her mother secrets. I always thought they were just family legends, but they weren't," Agnes finished. "Your great-grandmother was one of my students. She strayed back to the world of men, but the blood remains. The connection remains." She turned back to me and Jenna. "As for you two, every teacher needs students. Every family needs new blood." The implication of her words sent ice through my veins. "We're not staying here," I said firmly. "As soon as it's light, we're leaving. All three of us." Agnes laughed again. "No one leaves my woods without my permission, and I'm not inclined to give it." She tapped her walking stick on the floor. Tok, tok, tok. And the fire suddenly flared, sending shadows dancing across the walls. In those shadows, I could have sworn I saw figures moving, writhing, reaching. "What will you do?" Jenna asked, voice quavering. "Kill us." "Kill you?" Agnes looked genuinely surprised. "Why would I kill what I've worked so hard to bring here?" She moved to the shelf of glass jars and selected one, holding it up to the firelight. Inside was a dark liquid that seemed to move of its own accord. "I have much greater plans for you." She approached Jenna, uncorking the jar. "Starting with you, my injured bird. That leg must be so painful. Let me help." "Don't touch her," I warned, stepping between them. Agnes regarded me with something like amusement. "Brave, Rebecca," she said. "Always protecting others. But who protects you, I wonder?" Before I could react, Melissa grabbed my arm, pulling me aside with unexpected strength. "Let her help, Rebecca," she said, her voice oddly flat. "Jenna's in pain." I stared at Melissa in disbelief. Her eyes had changed. The pupils expanded until almost no iris was visible, and her face held an expression of serene certainty that was utterly unlike her. "Melissa, snap out of it," I shouted, shaking her by the shoulders, but her only response was to grab my other arm, holding me in place as Agnes approached Jenna with the open jar. "No! Jenna, don't!" I struggled against Melissa's grip, but she was unnaturally strong now. Jenna pressed herself against the wall, trying to get away from Agnes, but with her broken leg she had nowhere to go. "Please," she begged, "I don't want this." "What you want doesn't matter anymore," Agnes said gently, dipping 2 fingers into the jar. "Only what you need. Only what you'll become." She pressed her wet fingers to Jenna's forehead, leaving a dark smear that seemed to sink into her skin. Jenna gasped, her eyes flying wide, then her entire body went rigid. "What are you doing to her?" I cried, still struggling against Melissa's hold. "Helping her," Agnes replied. "Changing her. Making her one of us." Jenna's back arched, her mouth opening in a silent scream. The darkness from Agnes's touch was spreading, visible beneath her skin like black veins, crawling down her neck, her arms. "Stop it," I pleaded. "You're killing her." "No," Agnes said calmly. "Quite the opposite." As I watched in horror, Jenna's leg, the broken one, began to straighten, the unnatural angle correcting itself. She let out a long, shuddering breath, and when she opened her eyes again, they were like Melissa's, all pupil, no iris. "There," Agnes said, satisfied. "Better now, isn't it?" Jenna nodded slowly. "I can feel—" She paused, seeming to search for words. Everything. The earth beneath the cabin, the trees breathing, the stars watching. She smiled, a strange, dreamy expression. It's beautiful. This isn't happening, I whispered, ceasing my struggle as shock overwhelmed me. This can't be real. It's very real, Agnes assured me, as real as life and death and the old powers that govern both. She set down the jar and selected another. And now for you, Rebecca. Fear jolted me back to action. I twisted violently in Melissa's grasp and managed to break free, stumbling backward toward the door. You can't run, Agnes said mildly. Where would you go? Into the night? The storm? My woods? I'm everywhere out there. But I had to try. I lunged for the door, yanking it open and throwing myself out into the driving rain. Behind me, I heard Agnes laugh, a sound that seemed to come from the storm itself rather than a human throat. I ran blindly through the ravine, slipping on wet stones, crashing through underbrush. Lightning flashed, momentarily illuminating the narrow passage ahead, followed immediately by deafening thunder. The rain fell in sheets, soaking me instantly, plastering my hair to my face and neck. I had no plan beyond putting distance between myself and that cabin, between myself and whatever Agnes was doing to my friends. Friends who were no longer themselves, who had been transformed into something other. Behind me came the sound of pursuit. Not running footsteps, but that rhythmic tapping. Tok, tok, tok. Impossibly keeping pace with me despite my headlong flight. Tok, tok, tok. The humming began again, carried on the wind and rain, seeming to come from everywhere at once. Not just Agnes's voice now, but Melissa's and Jenna's joined with it, the three voices twining together in that eerily beautiful melody. I stumbled over a fallen branch, crashed to my knees, then scrambled up again, ignoring the pain. The ravine was narrowing, the walls squeezing in on either side. Ahead, in a flash of lightning, I glimpsed what appeared to be a dead end, a sheer rock face blocking any further progress. I was trapped. Desperate, I began searching for handholds, a way to climb out of the ravine. The rock was slick with rain, but I managed to pull myself up a few feet before slipping and falling hard onto the stony ground below. Pain shot through my ankle as I landed awkwardly. Tok, tok, tok. Closer now, much closer. I dragged myself into a small recess in the rock wall, hoping the darkness would hide me. Through the curtain of rain, I could make out a figure approaching. Tall and impossibly thin, gliding rather than walking, the walking stick tapping a counterpoint to the thunder. Agnes. She stopped several yards away, her head tilting as she scanned the ravine. Rebecca, she called, her voice carrying easily over the storm. This is foolish. You're only making things harder for yourself. I pressed deeper into my inadequate hiding place, trying to control my breathing, trying not to whimper from the pain in my ankle. I can feel your fear, Agnes continued, taking another step forward. I can hear your heart beating. I can smell your blood. She inhaled deeply. You're injured. Let me help you, as I helped Jenna. Stay away from me, I whispered, though I knew she couldn't hear me over the storm. Yet she turned directly toward my hiding spot, smiling that too-many-teeth smile. There you are. I broke cover, limping as fast as my injured ankle would allow, angling toward a narrow crevice in the rock face that I'd spotted during another lightning flash. It looked barely wide enough for a person to squeeze through, but it was my only chance. Agnes didn't hurry after me. She didn't need to. She simply continued her measured approach, tapping her stick. Talk, talk, talk. I reached the crevice and found it was indeed narrow, painfully so. I turned sideways and began forcing myself into the gap, feeling the rough stone scrape against my back and chest. My backpack made it almost impossible, but I couldn't spare the time to remove it. Rebecca, Agnes called again, now just yards away. Don't you want to know what I offered your friends? What I can offer you? I continued squeezing through the crevice, feeling my clothes tear, feeling skin abrade from my palms and elbows. The gap narrowed further, and for a terrifying moment I thought I was stuck, wedged permanently in the stone. "Immortality," Agnes said, her voice now just on the other side of the rock. "Knowledge of the old ways, power beyond human understanding. I offered them an end to pain, an end to fear, a pause, an end to being alone." I gave a final desperate push and broke through to the other side of the crevice, falling onto a muddy slope beyond. Without pausing, I scrambled up and ran, heedless of direction, driven purely by the need to escape. The terrain changed around me, the ravine giving way to dense forest once more. The trees loomed, their branches twisting in the wind like reaching arms. Roots seemed to rise from the ground specifically to trip me, and more than once I fell, each time taking longer to rise again. My lungs burned, my ankle throbbed, my whole body trembled with exhaustion and cold and fear. But I kept going, pushing deeper into the woods, hoping to lose Agnes in the vastness of the forest. How long I ran, I couldn't say. Time seemed to stretch and compress in strange ways. Eventually, I collapsed against the trunk of a massive pine, unable to go any further. The rain had lessened to a steady drizzle, and the thunder had moved off into the distance. I sat there, shivering, trying to think through my options. My friends were lost to me, transformed by Agnes into something inhuman. I was alone, injured, without supplies, hopelessly lost in a wilderness that seemed to obey Agnes's will rather than the laws of nature. My only hope was to find my way back to civilization, to a trail, a road, any sign of human presence. But I had no compass, no map, no idea which direction to take. My phone was long dead, and even if I picked a direction and started walking, I had no guarantee that Agnes's woods would let me leave. As if in response to my thoughts, the humming began again, distant but unmistakable. 3 voices in perfect, inhuman harmony. They were hunting me. With a groan, I pulled myself to my feet and started moving again, choosing a direction purely at random. The forest had grown darker, if that was possible. The spaces between trees filled with a blackness that seemed almost solid. The path ahead twisted and turned unpredictably, forcing me to constantly change direction. I became aware of shapes moving in my peripheral vision, darting from tree to tree, always just out of direct sight. The humming continued, sometimes fading almost to inaudibility, sometimes swelling until it seemed to come from directly behind me. Then I saw a light. At first, I thought it was another lightning flash, but it remained steady, a warm, yellow glow shining through the trees ahead. Hope surged through me. A campsite? A cabin? Some sign of normal human presence? I altered my course toward the light, moving as quickly as my injured ankle would allow. As I drew closer, I saw that it was indeed a cabin, but not Agnes's. This one was larger, more modern, with a metal roof rather than wood shingles and a proper porch with chairs. A ranger station, perhaps, or a hunting lodge. Whatever it was, it represented safety. I stumbled the last few yards to the porch and pounded on the door. "Hello? Please, I need help. Let me in." No response came from within, but the door swung open at my touch, just as Agnes's had. I hesitated on the threshold, suddenly wary. But the humming was growing louder behind me, and I could see shapes moving among the trees at the edge of the small clearing. I had no choice. I entered the cabin and quickly shut the door behind me, throwing the deadbolt. The interior was warmly lit by several kerosene lanterns and a cheerful fire in a stone fireplace much like the one in Agnes's cabin. But, unlike her sparse dwelling, this place was comfortably furnished with a sofa, rocking chairs, a large wooden dining table, and shelves lined with books. A doorway led to what appeared to be a kitchen, and another to what I assumed was a bedroom. "Hello," I called again. "Is anyone here?" No answer came. The cabin appeared empty of people, though it showed every sign of current habitation. A book lay open on the sofa, a half-eaten meal on the table, the fire burning strong. I moved to the window, peering out into the darkness. The humming had stopped. No shapes moved among the trees. For the moment, at least, I seemed to be safe. I sank onto the sofa, the adrenaline draining from my system, leaving me shaky and nauseated. My ankle had swollen to nearly twice its normal size, and various cuts and scrapes from my desperate flight stung fiercely. Whoever owned this cabin would surely return soon, I told myself. All I had to do was wait, explain my situation, ask for help. In the meantime, I needed to tend to my injuries. I found a bathroom off the kitchen, complete with a medicine cabinet containing basic first aid supplies. I cleaned and bandaged the worst of my cuts, then wrapped my ankle as best I could with an elastic bandage I found. The pain ebbed somewhat, but I knew I wouldn't be running again anytime soon. Returning to the main room, I finally allowed myself to really look at my surroundings. The books on the shelves caught my eye first. Leather-bound volumes with titles in languages I didn't recognize. Interspersed with them were jars containing herbs, crystals, and other substances. My unease growing, I moved to the dining table and examined the half-eaten meal. The plate contained what looked like ordinary stew, but beside it lay a small bowl of what appeared to be the same dark, viscous liquid Agnes had used on Jenna. With mounting horror, I looked more closely at the seemingly normal cabin. The fireplace stones were arranged in patterns similar to those at the base of the dead tree. The beams of the ceiling were carved with the same symbols I'd seen on Agnes's wall. And hanging above the mantel was an old photograph in an ornate frame. A photograph of Agnes Whitewood, looking exactly as she had appeared to me, though the picture had to be well over a century old. This wasn't a refuge. This was another of Agnes's places, perhaps her real home, while the crude cabin in the ravine was meant for, other purposes. I had walked right into her web. As if on cue, I heard the now familiar sound outside the door. Tock, tock, tock. Panic flooded through me. I looked frantically for a weapon, grabbing a heavy iron poker from beside the fireplace. I backed toward the bedroom door, hoping to find another exit. The deadbolt slid open on its own, and the door swung wide. But it wasn't Agnes who stood there. It was Melissa. She looked almost like her old self, except for her eyes. Still those expanded pupils that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. She wore dry clothes that must have come from the cabin, her hair neatly brushed, her expression serene. "There you are," she said, her voice both familiar and somehow not. "We've been so worried about you, Rebecca." "Stay back," I warned, brandishing the poker. "You're not Melissa anymore. I don't know what you are, but you're not my friend." Melissa smiled sadly. "I'm more myself than I've ever been," she said, stepping into the cabin. Behind her came Jenna, similarly transformed, similarly calm. "Where is she?" I demanded. "Where's Agnes?" "She'll be here soon," Melissa replied. "She's giving us time to talk to you first. She thought you might listen to us more easily than to her." "There's nothing to talk about," I insisted, though my voice trembled. "I'm not letting her do to me what she did to you." Jenna laughed softly. "You think this was done to us? This was a gift, Rebecca, one we accepted willingly." She moved with fluid grace, no sign of her broken leg except a slight tear in her pant leg where the bone had pierced the fabric. "Willingly? You were terrified, Jenna. You begged her to stop." "I was afraid of the unknown," Jenna admitted, "but now I understand, and so will you." They were advancing on me slowly, moving to either side, trying to flank me. I backed further into the bedroom, searching desperately for an exit. There was a window, but it was small and appeared to be sealed shut. "What did she do to you?" I asked, partly out of genuine horror, partly to buy time. "What are you now?" "We're what we were always meant to be," Melissa said. "What all humans once were, before they forgot the old ways, the old powers. Before they cut themselves off from the earth and sky and the spaces between." "You're talking nonsense," I said. "Am I?" Melissa gestured, and one of the kerosene lamps floated from its place on a side table, drifting through the air to hover between us. "Does this seem like nonsense to you?" I stared in disbelief as the lamp hung in midair, defying gravity. That's not possible." "All things are possible," Jenna said, "when you understand the true nature of reality. Agnes has shown us just the beginning. There's so much more to learn, Rebecca, so much more to become." I was cornered now, backed against the bedroom wall. The poker in my hands suddenly seemed pathetically inadequate. "Let me ask you something," Melissa said, taking another step toward me. "What are you fighting so hard to return to? A world of pain and loss? Of meaningless routine? Of slow decline into old age and death? We spent years watching people die, Rebecca. Young, old, deserving, undeserving. Death took them all. But it doesn't have to take us." Her words stirred something in me. A deep exhaustion, a recognition of the truth in what she said. We had seen so much death in our careers, so much suffering. And for what? To delay the inevitable by days, weeks, years at most? But I pushed the thought away. "Whatever she's offering, there's a price," I insisted. "There always is." "Of course there's a price," Jenna agreed readily. "Everything worthwhile has a cost, but it's one we're willing to pay." She gestured to herself, to Melissa. "Look at us, Rebecca. Really look. Are we suffering? Are we diminished?" They weren't. That was the terrible thing. They looked more alive, more vibrant than I'd ever seen them. Jenna's face, usually pinched with anxiety, was smooth and confident. Melissa, who had carried the weight of her responsibilities like a physical burden, stood straight and strong, radiating a calm power. "The price is your humanity," I said finally. "Your soul." Melissa laughed. "Such small thinking, such limited understanding. Humanity is just one way of being, Rebecca. We've evolved beyond it. And souls—" She shook her head. "Souls are not lost in this transformation. They're expanded, connected to something greater." I didn't want to listen anymore. Their words were like a drug, seeping into my mind, making terrible sense. I had to act. With a sudden movement, I lunged forward, swinging the poker at the floating lamp. It shattered, spraying kerosene and burning oil across the floor and walls. Flames erupted instantly, racing along the wooden floorboards. Melissa and Jenna jumped back, momentarily surprised by my action. I used their distraction to push past them, back into the main room of the cabin. But Agnes stood there, blocking my path to the door. "That was unwise," she said, her pale eyes reflecting the rapidly spreading fire. Around us, the cabin was beginning to burn in earnest, the dry timber catching quickly. Smoke billowed, making my eyes water and my lungs burn. "Let me go," I demanded, still clutching the poker, "or we all burn." Agnes smiled, unperturbed by the flames that were now licking at the ceiling. "Fire cannot harm me, child. I've survived much worse in my long years." She gestured, and the flames nearest her retreated, creating a circle of calm around her. "But you're still mortal, still fragile. The fire will consume you if you stay." She was right. Already the heat was becoming unbearable, the smoke thickening. I could hear Melissa and Jenna behind me, apparently as unconcerned by the inferno as Agnes. "Then let me leave," I pleaded. "Just let me go." "I can't do that," Agnes said with what sounded like genuine regret. "You know too much now, and you're part of this, whether you accept it or not. You were called here just as your friends were, just as all my children are." "I'm not your child," I spat. "Not yet," Agnes agreed, "but you will be. Through fire or water, through pain or love, through acceptance or force, you will be transformed. The only choice you have is how difficult you make the process." The flames had reached the bedroom now, and I could feel the scorching heat on my back. I couldn't go backward, and Agnes blocked the way forward. I was truly trapped. Then I remembered the kitchen. There had to be another door, a back entrance. I darted sideways, racing through the doorway I'd seen earlier. Behind me, I heard Agnes call out, but I didn't stop. The kitchen was already filling with smoke, but I spotted what I was looking for: a door in the far wall. I reached it in 3 strides and yanked it open, expecting to find myself outside once more. Instead, I found myself staring into Agnes's ravine cabin. Impossible. The 2 buildings had been nowhere near each other. And yet there it was, the single room with its stone fireplace and narrow bed, exactly as I'd left it. "The doors in my domain do not always lead where you expect," Agnes said from directly behind me. I whirled to face her, finding her standing calmly amid the smoke and flames of the burning kitchen. "Space bends to my will here, as does time. You cannot escape what is meant to be. Rebecca." She extended her hand, holding a small clay cup filled with the same dark liquid she'd used on Jenna. "Drink," she commanded. "Accept my gift willingly, and the transformation will be painless. Fight, and it will be agony beyond imagination." The smoke was choking me now, making it impossible to think clearly. My lungs burned, my eyes streamed. The heat was blistering against my skin, and before me stood a creature who offered escape from all of it, from pain, from mortality itself. For a moment, just a moment, I was tempted to give in, to join Melissa and Jenna in whatever they had become, to never again fear death or suffering. But some last spark of defiance flared within me. "No," I croaked through my smoke-raw throat. "I choose to remain human, whatever that means, whatever it costs." Agnes's face hardened. "So be it." She lunged toward me with inhuman speed, the cup still extended. I reacted purely on instinct, swinging the poker I still clutched. It connected solidly with her arm, knocking the cup from her grasp. The dark liquid splashed across the burning floor, where it sizzled and bubbled like acid. Agnes hissed in pain or rage. I couldn't tell which, and lunged again. This time I was ready, ducking under her outstretched arms and darting through the door that still stood open, leading impossibly back to her original cabin. I slammed the door shut behind me and frantically looked for something to barricade it with. The single chair would have to do. I wedged it under the doorknob just as something heavy slammed against the other side, making the wooden frame creak ominously. The ravine cabin was as I remembered it. A single room with a fireplace, a bed, and little else. The front door stood open, rain still visible beyond it. Freedom, if I could reach it. Another impact shook the door I'd barricaded. The chair legs scraped a few inches across the floor. It wouldn't hold for long. I limped toward the front door as quickly as my injured ankle would allow. Behind me, wood splintered as a third impact hit the barricaded door. I was halfway across the cabin when a figure appeared in the open doorway, silhouetted against the night. Jenna. Her transformed eyes gleamed in the darkness as she blocked my escape. "Don't make this harder than it needs to be," she said. "You can't win against what we've become." The barricaded door finally gave way with a crash. I turned to see Agnes standing in the doorway with Melissa right behind her. We were all once more in the small ravine cabin, as if the burning lodge had never existed. I was surrounded. "It ends here, Rebecca," Agnes said, advancing slowly. "Your resistance, your fear, your limited existence, all of it ends tonight." I backed away until I hit the edge of the bed. There was nowhere left to go, no more tricks to try. My friends, the people I had trusted most in the world, were now Agnes's creatures, strange and unknowable, and I was about to join them. Agnes reached into her pocket and produced another small cup, identical to the one I'd knocked away. The dark liquid inside seemed to absorb what little light there was in the cabin, creating a void in the shape of a cup. "Last chance," she said. "Willingly or unwillingly, the result is the same. But one path is pain, the other is transcendence." I looked from Agnes to Melissa to Jenna, searching for any hint of the women they had been. There was nothing human left in their eyes, nothing I recognized. That's when I noticed the fireplace, specifically the iron cooking pot that hung from a hook above the cold hearth. In the back of my nurse's mind, something clicked. the dark liquid, the way Agnes had applied it to Jenna's forehead, the way it had spread beneath her skin like a living thing. It wasn't magic. It was something organic, something that could be destroyed. With my last burst of strength, I lunged past Agnes toward the fireplace. I grabbed the heavy iron pot and swung it with all my might at the cup in Agnes's hand. The impact sent the dark liquid flying, not onto the floor this time, but directly into Agnes's face. She screamed, a sound unlike anything I'd ever heard, more animal than human. The liquid seemed to cling to her skin like tar, spreading rapidly across her features. She clawed at her face, but only succeeded in spreading it further. "What have you done?" she shrieked. "What have you done?" The liquid was moving with purpose now, flowing into her eyes, her nose, her mouth. Wherever it touched, her skin began to wither, to age, to decay. Years, decades, centuries of suspended time catching up in seconds. Melissa and Jenna stood frozen in shock, watching as their mistress writhed in agony. Then, to my amazement, the black veins that had spread beneath Jenna's skin began to recede. Her eyes cleared, the unnatural darkness draining away. Beside her, Melissa underwent a similar transformation, gasping as if waking from a dream. Agnes fell to her knees, still clawing at her rapidly aging face. "My children," she rasped, reaching toward Melissa and Jenna. "Help me." But they stared at her with growing horror and recognition, backing away from her grasping hands. "What did she do to us?" Jenna whispered, looking down at her healed leg as if seeing it for the first time. "I don't know," Melissa answered, her voice shaking. "But it's wearing off. Whatever hold she had, it's breaking." Agnes gave one final terrible cry, and then her body seemed to collapse in on itself, aging centuries in moments, until all that remained was a pile of dust and ancient cloth on the cabin floor. Her walking stick, the source of that terrible tapping, rolled away, coming to rest against the fireplace stones. For a long moment, none of us moved or spoke. The only sound was the rain, still falling steadily outside. Then Jenna began to sob, deep, racking cries that shook her entire body. Melissa went to her, wrapping her arms around her, though she too was trembling violently. Is it over?" I finally managed to ask. Melissa looked at the pile of dust, then at me. "I think so," she said. "I can feel her influence fading. The things she showed me, the things she made me believe, they're becoming like dreams, hard to hold on to." "We need to leave," I said. "Now, before anything else happens." No one argued. We gathered what supplies remained and stumbled out into the night. The rain had stopped, and breaks in the clouds revealed a sky brilliant with stars. For the first time since we'd entered these woods, the air felt clean, the silence natural rather than watchful. We made our way slowly back up the ravine, supporting each other over the difficult terrain. My ankle throbbed with each step, but the pain was almost welcome, a reminder that I was still human, still myself. "I'm so sorry," Melissa said as we paused to rest. "I should never have brought us here. I should have known the stories were real." "You couldn't have known," I said, though part of me wanted to blame her, to be angry at the danger she'd put us in. "I think I did know, on some level," she admitted. "I've been drawn to these hills my whole life, to the stories about Agnes. Something in me recognized something in her." She shuddered. "If you hadn't been so strong, Rebecca, we'd all be whatever she was making us into." "What was she?" Jenna asked, her voice small. "What did she want with us?" "I don't think we'll ever know for sure," I said, "but she was lonely. She wanted a family, disciples. She'd been alone in these woods for so long." We fell silent, each lost in our own thoughts. By the time dawn broke, we had reached the ridge where we'd first encountered the dead tree with its hanging ornaments. It still stood, twisted and ominous, but as we watched, the bones and feathers and carved stones that hung from its branches began to fall, one by one, clattering to the ground as if cut by invisible hands. The forest was reclaiming itself, shedding Agnes's influence. We found our way back to the main trail by mid-morning, exhausted but alive. Jenna's leg showed no sign of having been broken, though she walked with a slight limp, a psychosomatic reminder of trauma rather than physical injury. Melissa's eyes were clear again, but haunted, and I knew mine must look the same. None of us spoke much on the long hike back to our car. What was there to say? We had glimpsed something beyond human understanding, something ancient and terrible and almost seductive in its power, and we had rejected it, chosen humanity with all its frailty and limitation. But sometimes in my dreams, I still hear it, tok tok tok, and sometimes, just before waking, I catch myself humming a melody I shouldn't remember, with words in a language I've never learned. And on those mornings, I wake with the taste of earth and copper on my tongue, and the certainty that something of Agnes Whitewood still exists in the dark woods of the Black Hills, waiting for someone else to hear her call, waiting for me to return. My name is Eli Morgan. I'm 34 years old. This happened in September 2024. The thing about spending your entire life in cities is that you forget what true silence sounds like. That's what Maggie always said anyway. My girlfriend had been trying to convince me to disconnect for years, claiming that a weekend without cell service would somehow reset our brains and save our relationship. I always found excuses, deadlines, meetings, family obligations, until I ran out of them. So there we were, driving our rented SUV through the winding roads of Badlands National Park in South Dakota, windows down, breathing in the crisp autumn air. Maggie's auburn hair whipped around her face as she leaned out the window, pointing excitedly at the stark limestone formations rising like ancient monuments against the sky. She'd planned everything, our 3-day hike through Sage Creek Wilderness area, one of the most remote parts of the park. No one else will be out there this time of year, she said, her green eyes gleaming with excitement. Just us and the buffalo. I forced a smile, but my stomach nodded. I'd always been a city guy, Manhattan born and raised. The most wilderness I'd experienced was Central Park. But Maggie, with her outdoor education background and spirit for adventure, had been planning this trip for months. It was her last attempt to inject some life into our failing relationship, though neither of us had said those words out loud. We arrived at the ranger station mid-afternoon. Inside, a tall man with leathery skin and a gray mustache looked up from his desk. "You folks headed into Sage Creek?" Ranger Matthews, according to his name tag, asked, eyeing our expensive gear with skepticism. "Yes," Maggie answered confidently. "We've got our backcountry permit all set up. 3 nights hiking from Deer Haven to the northwest section." The ranger frowned. "That's mighty isolated territory. Haven't had many hikers out that way lately." "That's the idea," Maggie said with a smile. As the ranger reviewed our permits, a younger man in a similar uniform entered, dropping a stack of papers on the counter. He had a deep scar running from his left eye to his jaw. "Oh, Jim," Matthews said, "these folks are heading to Sage Creek. Didn't you say something about strange tracks out that way?" The younger ranger, Jim, glanced at us, his expression darkening. "Yeah, found some odd prints last week. Probably just a mountain lion, though." His eyes lingered on me. "You two experienced hikers." "I am," Maggie said. "Eli here's a beginner, but I've been leading wilderness trips for years." Jim nodded slowly. "Just stick to the marked trails. And if you see anything unusual, head back this way. Cell service is non-existent out there." "Unusual like what?" I asked. Jim and Matthews exchanged glances. "Just wildlife," Matthews said dismissively. "Buffalo can be dangerous if you get too close, and there's been reports of a drifter in the area. Nothing to worry about, but best to be cautious." As we walked back to our car, I caught Maggie's arm. "A drifter? Maybe we should pick somewhere else." She laughed. "Don't tell me you're scared. The rangers have to warn everyone about every little thing for liability reasons. Trust me, the biggest danger out there is forgetting the bug spray. If only she'd been right. We left our car at the designated trailhead and set off with our backpacks. Within an hour, the world had changed around us. The formations of the Badlands looked like something from another planet. Spires and buttes in shades of red, orange, and white, carved by millions of years of wind and water. Prairie grasses swayed in the breeze, and the vast, blue sky stretched endlessly above. Maggie walked ahead of me, her stride confident. She'd dressed the part in her hiking pants, moisture-wicking shirt, and wide-brimmed hat. I followed in my brand-new boots that were already giving me blisters. "Isn't this glorious?" she called over her shoulder. No emails, no texts, no social media, just us and nature. "Glorious," I echoed, not entirely convinced as I swatted away a mosquito. By sunset, we'd hiked about 8 miles into the wilderness. Maggie found a flat area protected by rock formations for our campsite. As she expertly set up our tent, I attempted to start a fire with the fancy waterproof matches I'd purchased for the trip. "You need smaller kindling," Maggie instructed, taking over after watching me struggle. Within minutes, she had a crackling fire going. We ate freeze-dried beef stew for dinner, which tasted better than I expected after hours of hiking. As darkness fell, the temperature dropped dramatically. We huddled near the fire and Maggie pointed out constellations I'd never been able to see through New York's light pollution. "See? This is what we've been missing," she said, leaning her head on my shoulder. I had to admit, it was beautiful. The stars looked like someone had spilled diamond dust across black velvet. The silence was profound. No car horns, no sirens, no neighbors arguing through thin apartment walls, just the occasional rustle of wind through grass and the soft crackling of our fire. That's when we heard it. A long, low howl that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. Maggie sat up straight. "Wolf? No, there shouldn't be wolves in this part of the Badlands." "Coyote," I suggested. "Maybe," she said, but she sounded uncertain. It sounded bigger. The howl came again, closer this time. It didn't sound like any animal I'd ever heard, more like a human voice trying to imitate an animal, but getting it wrong in some fundamental way. "Let's get in the tent," Maggie said, kicking dirt onto the fire. Inside our tent, we zipped our sleeping bags together and lay close. Despite the strangeness of the howl, exhaustion from the day's hike soon pulled me toward sleep. Just before I drifted off, Maggie whispered, "Did you hear that?" I listened. Footsteps circling our tent. Too heavy for a coyote, too deliberate for a buffalo. "Probably just deer," I whispered back, though I didn't believe it. Maggie unzipped her side of the sleeping bag and reached for the flashlight. "What are you doing?" I hissed. "I'm going to check." "Are you crazy? Stay here." But Maggie had already unzipped the tent flap and stepped outside, flashlight beam cutting through the darkness. I counted to 10, waiting for her to return or call out. When she didn't, I scrambled out after her. The moonlight bathed the landscape in an eerie silver glow. Our campsite looked untouched, no signs of animals or intruders, and no sign of Maggie. "Maggie," I called, my voice sounding small in the vast silence. Nothing. "Maggie," I shouted, panic rising in my chest. "Over here." I turned toward her voice. She stood about 20 yards away at the edge of a drop-off, her back to me. "What is it? Did you see something?" I asked, walking toward her. When I reached her side, I saw she was staring down into a narrow ravine. Her flashlight illuminated something at the bottom, what looked like a pile of bones. "Animal carcass," she said. "Recent. Something's been eating out here." "Great," I muttered. "Let's get back to the tent." As we turned to go, Maggie's flashlight caught something else. A symbol scratched into the rock face beside us. It looked like a crude stick figure with too many limbs, surrounded by smaller figures that might have been animals. "Native American petroglyph?" I suggested. Maggie shook her head. "No, this is fresh. See how the scratch marks are still light-colored? This was done recently. An uneasy feeling crept up my spine. Kids playing pranks? We're 15 miles from the nearest road, Eli. Back in the tent, neither of us slept well. Every sound, the wind, distant animal calls, the fabric of our tent moving, sent my heart racing. Sometime near dawn, I finally drifted off, only to be jolted awake by Maggie's scream. I sat up, disoriented. Morning light filtered through the tent walls. Maggie was sitting up, staring at her phone. "What? What is it?" She turned to me, her face pale. "My photos from yesterday. They're all gone." "Maybe you accidentally deleted them." "No, they've been replaced. Look." She handed me her phone. Where there should have been pictures of landscapes and selfies of us on the trail, there were now dark, blurry images that looked like they'd been taken at night. In one, I could make out what seemed to be our tent from outside. In another, what looked disturbingly like a sleeping figure. Me. "This isn't funny, Eli." "It wasn't me. How could I have taken these?" She grabbed the phone back, checking the timestamps. These were taken at 3:17 a.m. We were both asleep. I felt cold despite the warming tent. Maybe your phone glitched, or someone hacked it remotely? "There's no signal out here, remember? That was the whole point." She scrolled through more photos, then suddenly stopped, her breath catching. "Eli." She showed me the last photo. It was clearer than the others, a close-up of what appeared to be a face but not quite human. The proportions were wrong somehow, the eyes too large and widely spaced, the mouth stretched in an impossible grin with teeth that looked filed to points. The skin had a grayish cast and seemed to be peeling in places. "This has to be some kind of joke," I said, my mouth dry. "Someone messing with us." Maggie deleted all the photos with shaking hands. "Let's pack up. I don't want to stay here anymore." I agreed wholeheartedly. As we emerged from the tent, I noticed something that hadn't been there the night before, a circle of small stones placed around our campsite, each one topped with what looked like tufts of animal fur. "Did you do this?" Maggie asked, her voice tight. I shook my head. Maybe it was animals? Pack rats or something? Even as I said it, I knew it was ridiculous. No animal would create such a deliberate pattern. We packed quickly, barely speaking. As Maggie rolled up the tent, she suddenly stopped. "Eli, come look at this." On the outside of the rainfly, someone had drawn the same stick figure symbol we'd seen on the rock face. "We need to get out of here. Now!" I shouldered my pack, not bothering to organize it properly. Maggie checked her GPS device. "If we head southeast, we can cut across to Sheep Mountain Table. There's a ranger station there. It's only about 10 miles. Lead the way." We set off at a brisk pace, both of us glancing over our shoulders every few minutes. The beautiful landscape now seemed menacing. Too many places for someone to hide, watching us. After about 2 hours of hiking, Maggie stopped abruptly. "This isn't right," she said, checking her GPS. "We should have hit a marked trail by now." She frowned at the screen. "That's weird. According to this, we've been walking in circles. How is that possible? We've been walking straight." "I don't know." She tapped the device. "Maybe it's malfunctioning." She pulled out her paper map and compass. After a few minutes of comparing landmarks to the map, her frown deepened. "This doesn't make any sense. According to the map, that formation over there is Castle Butte, which means we've somehow gone northwest instead of southeast." I looked up at the sun. "That's impossible. The sun rises in the east. We've been heading toward it all morning." Maggie looked at me strangely. "Eli, it's almost noon. The sun is overhead." I checked my watch. It read 8:17 a.m. Maggie's watch said 11:43 a.m. "Something's wrong with your watch," I said. "Or yours." She looked around, anxiety clear on her face. "Let's try again. The ranger station at Sheep Mountain should be that way." She pointed. "We'll aim for it directly and check the compass every few minutes." We walked for another hour, stopping frequently to confirm our direction. Despite our best efforts, we somehow ended up back at our original campsite, the circle of stones still in place. "This is impossible," Maggie whispered. "Are we losing our minds?" A twig snapped behind us. We both whirled around. A man stood about 30 yards away, watching us. He was tall and gaunt, dressed in dirty jeans and a flannel shirt despite the warm day. Even from this distance, I could see his eyes were unnaturally pale. "Hello there," he called, his voice oddly cheerful. "You folks lost?" Maggie and I exchanged glances. Part of me was relieved to see another human being, but something about the man set off alarm bells. "We're fine," Maggie called back, "just taking a break before heading out." The man approached, his movements fluid but somehow wrong, as if his joints worked differently than they should. "Name's Jeremiah Blackwood," he said as he drew closer. His smile revealed yellowed teeth. "I live out these ways. Don't get many visitors." "You live out here?" I asked. "In the national park?" He gestured vaguely behind him. "Got a cabin a few miles that way. Been in my family for generations. Before this was a park, you understand." That didn't sound right. The Badlands had been a national park since the 1930s. "Well, nice to meet you," Maggie said, clearly trying to end the conversation. "We should get going." "Where you headed?" Jeremiah asked. "Sheep Mountain Ranger Station," I said. Jeremiah's smile flickered for just an instant. "You don't want to go that way. Trails washed out from the spring floods. Dangerous. I can show you a better route." He pointed in the opposite direction from where we'd been trying to go. "Thanks, but we have a GPS," Maggie said, patting her pocket where the device was stored. Jeremiah chuckled. "Technology doesn't work right out here. Something about the minerals in the soil. Plays havoc with compasses, too." He tapped his temple. "Better to trust someone who knows the land." I glanced at Maggie, who gave an almost imperceptible shake of her head. "We appreciate the offer," I said, "but we'll stick to our route." Jeremiah's friendly demeanor changed instantly. His pale eyes hardened, and his mouth twisted into a grimace. "Suit yourselves," he said coldly, "but these lands don't take kindly to outsiders who don't listen to advice." He turned and walked away, disappearing behind a rock formation. "Okay, that was creepy as hell," I whispered once he was out of earshot. "He's trying to lead us away from the ranger station," Maggie said. "There's no cabin out here. The whole park is federal land." "Do you think he's the drifter the rangers mentioned?" "Maybe, or a poacher." She hesitated. "But how did he know we were using a compass? And what he said about technology not working?" "Coincidence," I said, though I didn't believe it. "Let's go, and keep an eye out for him." We set off again, this time using only natural landmarks for navigation. If we kept the distinctive formation called the Castle to our right and headed toward the tallest butte visible to the east, we should eventually hit a marked trail. The sun beat down mercilessly as we hiked across the rugged terrain. Despite drinking regularly from our water bottles, I felt increasingly thirsty. My new boots had rubbed raw spots on both heels, and each step was becoming painful. "Need a break?" Maggie asked, noticing my limp. "I'm fine," I lied. She stopped anyway, pulling out the first aid kit to give me some moleskin for my blisters. As she knelt to help me apply it, she suddenly grabbed my arm, her fingers digging in painfully. "Don't move," she whispered. I followed her gaze. About 50 yards ahead of us, partially hidden behind a rock outcropping, was Jeremiah. He appeared to be talking to someone else, a smaller figure I couldn't make out clearly. "How did he get ahead of us?" I whispered. "I don't know, but let's change direction." We veered west, hoping to circle around without being spotted. For the next hour, we picked our way carefully through the landscape, staying low and using the natural features for cover. Just as I was beginning to think we'd lost him, we crested a small rise and found ourselves looking down into a shallow valley. In the center stood a small, dilapidated cabin that looked like it had been there for a century. Smoke rose from a crooked stone chimney. "That's impossible," Maggie said. "There are no private residences in this part of the park." Yet there it was, and outside, hanging from a clothing line were pieces of fabric that looked disturbingly like hiking clothes, similar to what we were wearing. "Let's go back," I said. "Try another direction." Before Maggie could respond, a sound reached us. Singing. A woman's voice, high and clear, singing a melody that made my skin crawl. It seemed to be coming from the cabin. "Hello?" a voice called, Jeremiah's voice. "I see you up there. Come on down and meet the missus." I grabbed Maggie's arm. "Run!" We turned and fled back the way we'd come, scrambling over rocks and through patches of prairie grass. We ran until our lungs burned, then finally stopped in the shelter of a large rock formation. "Did he follow us?" Maggie gasped. I peered back the way we'd come. No sign of pursuit. "I don't think so." "That cabin," Maggie said. "It can't be there. I studied the maps for weeks. There are no structures in this part of the park." "Obviously your maps are outdated," I said, trying to sound more confident than I felt. "And those clothes on the line?" I didn't want to think about what they might mean, that we weren't the first hikers to encounter Jeremiah. "Let's just focus on finding our way out," I said. "The sun will be setting in a few hours." We consulted the map again, trying a new approach. If we headed directly south, we would eventually hit the park road, no matter what. As we walked, I couldn't shake the feeling we were being watched. Occasionally, I thought I caught glimpses of movement from the corner of my eye, but when I turned to look, nothing was there. The light was beginning to fade when Maggie suddenly stopped. "Listen," she said. At first, I heard nothing. Then I caught it. The woman's singing again, but now it seemed to be coming from ahead of us instead of behind. "How is that possible?" I whispered. Before Maggie could answer, another sound cut through the air. A scream, high and desperate, abruptly cut off. "Someone's in trouble," Maggie said, already moving toward the sound. "Wait," I grabbed her arm. "It could be a trap." She shook me off. "Or it could be another hiker. We can't just ignore it." She was right, of course, but everything in me screamed that we should run in the opposite direction. Reluctantly, I followed as Maggie moved cautiously toward where the scream had come from. We crested another rise and found ourselves looking down at, impossibly, the same cabin we'd seen earlier. "This can't be happening," Maggie whispered. "We've been walking south. That cabin was north of us." As we watched, the door of the cabin opened. A woman stepped out, rail-thin with long gray hair hanging in matted clumps around a face that was deeply lined. She wore a dress that might once have been white but was now a dingy gray. In her hand, she carried what looked like a large hunting knife. "Martha," Jeremiah's voice called from inside the cabin. "We got company coming." The woman, Martha, looked up directly at our position, though we were well hidden. A smile spread across her face, revealing gaps where teeth should have been. "I see them," she called back, her voice the same one we'd heard singing. "Two of them, just like you said." My blood ran cold. There was no way she could see us from that distance, hidden as we were behind rocks. "We need to go," I whispered to Maggie. "Now!" For once, she didn't argue. We backed away slowly, then turned and ran once we were out of sight of the cabin. The sun was setting rapidly now, casting long shadows that seemed to reach for us like grasping hands. We ran until we couldn't anymore, then walked quickly, changing direction frequently in hopes of throwing off any pursuit. Darkness fell completely, and we were forced to use our flashlights. We found a small cave-like opening in a rock face and decided to take shelter for the night. "We'll rest for a few hours," Maggie said, her voice steady despite everything. "Then start again before dawn. If we keep heading south, we have to hit the road eventually." I nodded, too exhausted to speak. We didn't bother setting up the tent, just unrolled our sleeping bags at the mouth of the small cave. Neither of us suggested a fire. The less attention we drew to ourselves, the better. We ate energy bars in silence, both lost in our own thoughts. Finally, Maggie spoke. "This doesn't make any sense. That cabin can't be in two places at once." "Maybe there are two cabins. Twins." Even as I suggested it, I knew how ridiculous it sounded. "And that woman knew where we were without seeing us," Maggie continued, ignoring my comment. "And how did Jeremiah get ahead of us this morning?" "I don't know." I took her hand. "But we'll figure it out in the morning. For now, let's try to get some sleep." We decided to take turns keeping watch. Maggie took the first shift while I tried to sleep, but rest wouldn't come. Every sound from outside, the wind, the occasional call of a night bird, sent my heart racing. When it was my turn to watch, Maggie fell into an uneasy sleep beside me. I sat at the mouth of our small shelter, staring out into the darkness, my flashlight off to preserve the batteries but close at hand. The night was clear, stars scattered like dust across the sky. Under different circumstances, it would have been beautiful. Now it just made me feel exposed. Around what I guessed was midnight, I heard it. Footsteps approaching our shelter. Slow, deliberate steps that no animal would make. I shook Maggie awake, pressing my hand over her mouth to keep her quiet. Her eyes flew open, instantly alert. I pointed outside and mouthed, "Someone's coming." We pressed ourselves against the back wall of the small cave, hoping the darkness would hide us. The footsteps stopped just outside. "I know you're in there," came Jeremiah's voice, silky and amused. "No sense in hiding." Neither of us moved or made a sound. "The missus has dinner almost ready. Venison stew. You two must be hungry after all that running around today." When we still didn't respond, he sighed loudly. "Have it your way. But these lands play tricks on those who don't know them. You'll never find your way out without help. The Blackwoods have lived here for generations. We know the secrets." A pause then. "We'll be waiting when you change your minds." The footsteps retreated, and soon the night was silent again, save for the pounding of my heart. "How did he find us?" Maggie whispered when enough time had passed. "I don't know, but we need to leave, now." We packed our few belongings and slipped out of the cave. The night was still and clear, the moon providing just enough light to see by. "Which way?" I asked. Maggie pointed. "South, always south." We walked through the night, stumbling over unseen obstacles, picking our way across the alien landscape. Neither of us suggested using our flashlights. Better to risk a twisted ankle than alert Jeremiah to our location. As dawn approached, an eerie fog rolled in, reducing visibility to a few feet. The air felt unnaturally cold and damp for the badlands, which were typically dry even in the early morning. "This isn't right," Maggie murmured. "Fog like this is rare out here, especially this time of year." We pressed on, using the compass to maintain our southerly direction. The fog seemed to deaden all sound, creating a cocoon of silence around us. It was disorienting, like walking through a dream. That's when we heard the singing again. Martha's voice, somehow coming from all directions at once in that eerie, atonal melody that set my teeth on edge. "Just keep walking," Maggie said, gripping my hand tightly. "Don't stop." The singing grew louder, and now I could make out words, an old folk song about death and burial. As we walked, dark shapes appeared in the fog, just at the edge of visibility. Tall, thin figures that might have been trees or rocks or people standing perfectly still, watching us pass. The fog began to thin as the sun rose higher, revealing that we were walking through a section of badlands I hadn't seen before, a forest of stone pillars rising like petrified trees from the earth. "The door of hell," Maggie whispered, checking the map. "That's what this area is called." "Comforting," I muttered. As the last of the fog burned away, I saw something that made my heart sink. The now familiar shape of Jeremiah's cabin, sitting in a small clearing ahead of us. "How is this possible?" I said, stopping in my tracks. "We've been walking south all night." Maggie looked as bewildered as I felt. "I don't know. The compass can't be wrong. Unless—" She looked up at the sun, then down at her compass again. "Unless south isn't south anymore." What does that even mean? Before she could answer, the cabin door opened. Martha stepped out, waving cheerfully as if we were expected guests arriving for Sunday dinner. "There you are," she called. "Breakfast is almost ready." "Run," I said, turning away from the cabin. But Maggie caught my arm. "Wait, look." I followed her gaze. In the distance behind the cabin, clearly visible in the morning light, was a road, and what looked like the ranger station at Sheep Mountain Table. "We've been going in the right direction after all," Maggie said. "The ranger station is just beyond the cabin." "So, we what? Walk straight past the cabin of the creepy people who've been stalking us? Do you have a better idea? We can't keep wandering in circles. We're running out of water and food." She was right. My water bottle was nearly empty and we had only a few energy bars left between us. "Fine, but we stay together and we don't stop for anything." We approached cautiously. Martha remained on the porch, still smiling that gap-toothed smile. As we drew closer, I noticed something I hadn't been able to see from a distance. Her eyes were the same unnatural pale color as Jeremiah's, almost white. "Don't be shy," she called. "We don't get many visitors, do we, Jeremiah?" Jeremiah appeared in the doorway behind her. "Not many that stay for dinner, at least," he said, then laughed as if he'd made a joke. We kept walking, aiming to pass the cabin at a safe distance. "Now, don't be like that," Martha called. "We're just being neighborly. Ain't no cell service out here, and the rangers don't come this way much. Folks need to look out for each other." We were almost past the cabin when I noticed something hanging from a hook on the porch. A familiar-looking red backpack, identical to the one Maggie was carrying. Maggie saw it too. Her step faltered. "Keep going," I whispered, "but that's—" "I know. Keep walking." We were just past the cabin when Jeremiah called out, "You left something behind last time, Margaret." Maggie froze. I hadn't told him her name. She turned slowly. "What did you say?" Jeremiah grinned, revealing those yellowed teeth. "Said you left something behind when you were here before. Your journal. Got some real interesting writings in it." "I've never been here before," Maggie said, but her voice wavered. "Sure you have. Don't you remember? You and that fellow. What was his name? Martha?" "David," Martha supplied. "Nice boy. Didn't scream much." A cold horror washed over me. David had been Maggie's boyfriend before me, the one who had disappeared during a solo camping trip 2 years ago. "You're lying," Maggie said, but there were tears in her eyes. Jeremiah disappeared into the cabin and returned holding a small leather-bound book. Even from this distance, I recognized it. Maggie's journal, the one she'd been devastated to lose around the time David vanished. "Come and get it," Jeremiah said, waving the journal. "It's got some mighty personal things in here. Wouldn't want just anyone reading it." Maggie took a step toward the cabin. "Don't," I said, grabbing her arm. "It's a trick." She shook me off. "That's my journal. It disappeared with David." "Exactly. They're admitting they did something to David." But Maggie was already walking toward the cabin as if pulled by an invisible string. "Maggie, stop!" I ran after her. She was halfway to the porch when Martha disappeared inside the cabin and came back holding something else. A knife. The blade crusted with what looked like dried blood. I caught up to Maggie and grabbed her shoulders, forcing her to look at me. "We need to go. Now." Something moved in the windows of the cabin, faces pressing against the glass. Pale, gaunt faces with those same strange eyes. "How many people are in there?" I whispered. 5, 6. Maggie's voice was distant, her gaze still fixed on the journal in Jeremiah's hand. "Too many. Come on." I tugged her arm, and this time she came with me. We backed away from the cabin, then turned and ran toward where we'd seen the ranger station. Behind us, Martha's singing started again, louder now, almost celebratory. We ran until the cabin was out of sight, then slowed to a jog, both of us gasping for breath. "That was my journal," Maggie said between breaths. "The one I lost when David—" "I know," I said. which means they probably had something to do with his disappearance. We need to get to the rangers. Tell them about the cabin. We continued toward where we'd seen the ranger station, moving as quickly as our exhausted bodies would allow. The terrain became steeper, the path winding up toward a plateau. Just as we crested the rise, I heard a voice behind us. "Leaving so soon?" I whirled around. Jeremiah stood about 20 feet away, though I hadn't heard him approach. He still held Maggie's journal. "How did you—" I began. "Told you," Jeremiah said with that unsettling grin. "These lands play tricks, especially on outsiders." "Stay back," I warned, picking up a rock. It was a pathetic weapon, but it was all I had. Jeremiah laughed. "No need for that. Just wanted to return something to the lady." He tossed the journal to the ground between us. Maggie stared at it but didn't move. "Go ahead," Jeremiah urged. "It's yours, ain't it?" "Don't touch it," I said. "Smart boy," Jeremiah said, still smiling. Smarter than the last one. He never figured it out. He took a step closer. "You know what we are, don't you?" Something about the way he said it sent ice through my veins. I'd been assuming they were some kind of backwoods killers, people who lived off the grid and preyed on hikers. But the way things didn't add up, the cabin appearing in different places, the confusion with directions, the unnatural fog. "You're not human," I said, the words sounding ridiculous even as they left my mouth. Jeremiah's grin widened, showing too many teeth. "Not anymore." A wind picked up, hot and dry, carrying with it a smell like rotting meat. Jeremiah's form seemed to flicker, like bad reception on an old TV. For just an instant, I saw something else standing where he was. Something tall and gaunt with 2 long limbs and a face that was mostly mouth. "Run!" I screamed, grabbing Maggie's hand. We fled up the path toward the ranger station. Behind us, Jeremiah's laughter turned into something else. A howl like the one we'd heard that first night, but now I recognized it for what it was. Hunger. The ranger station came into view, a small building with a flagpole out front. A Park Service truck was parked outside. Hope surged through me. "We made it!" I gasped, pulling Maggie toward the building. But something was wrong. The closer we got, the more details seemed off. The flag hung limp in the windless air. The truck was covered in a fine layer of dust, as if it hadn't been moved in weeks. And no one responded to our shouts. We reached the station door. It was unlocked. I pushed it open, calling out, "Hello? Park Service?" Silence. The interior was dim, illuminated only by what sunlight filtered through dusty windows. The place looked abandoned. Papers scattered across the floor, a chair overturned, a half-empty coffee mug on the desk with a film of green mold on the surface. "What happened here?" Maggie whispered. I moved toward the desk, looking for a radio or phone, anything to call for help. The landline was dead, the radio nothing but static. On the wall, a large map of the park was marked with red pins. Several were clustered in the area where we'd been hiking. Beneath the map, scrawled in what looked like marker on the wall itself, "Blackwood Territory, do not enter." "Eli," Maggie called from across the room. "Look at this." She stood by a bulletin board covered with missing persons flyers. There were dozens of them, going back years. Young hikers, mostly couples. Some of the faces looked vaguely familiar. People whose disappearances had made the national news briefly before being forgotten. And there, in the center, a face I knew well. David, Maggie's ex-boyfriend. Smiling in the photo, no idea what awaited him. "They've been doing this for years," Maggie said, her voice hollow. "How has no one stopped them?" A thought occurred to me. A terrible one. What if the rangers know? What if they can't stop them? That's ridiculous. They're park rangers, not supernatural experts. I looked around at the abandoned station. Then where are they? Why did they warn us about a drifter, but not about the Blackwoods? Maybe they didn't know. I pointed to the writing on the wall. They knew something. A sound from outside caught our attention. A vehicle approaching. We rushed to the window. A Park Service Jeep was pulling up, a uniformed ranger at the wheel. "Thank God," Maggie breathed. We hurried outside, waving our arms. The ranger, a middle-aged woman with short gray hair, looked surprised to see us. "What are you folks doing out here?" she asked, climbing out of the Jeep. Her name tag read, Collins. "We need help," I said. "There are people in the park, the Blackwoods. They're dangerous." Ranger Collins' expression changed, her eyebrows drawing together. "Where did you hear that name?" "We met them," Maggie said. "They have a cabin. They've been following us, stalking us. I think they killed my ex-boyfriend 2 years ago." The ranger's hand moved to the gun at her hip. "Get in the vehicle, now." We didn't argue, climbing into the back of the Jeep. Collins got on her radio. "This is Collins at Sheep Mountain. I've got 2 hikers here, say they encountered the Blackwoods, requesting immediate evacuation." Static, then a voice. "Copy that. Stay put. Back up en route." Collins turned to us. "When exactly did you see them?" "First time was yesterday afternoon," I said, "but they've been stalking us ever since. Their cabin keeps moving." Collins nodded as if this made perfect sense. "The cabin doesn't move. The land does." "What does that mean?" Maggie asked. Collins sighed. "The Blackwoods are, well, we don't know exactly what they are. They've been in this area since before it was a park. Before white settlers, even. The local tribes had stories about them. People who weren't people anymore." "Wendigos," I suggested, remembering something I'd read about Native American folklore. "Something like that. The tribes avoided this whole area. Called it the thin place, where the barrier between worlds was weak. And the Park Service just lets them exist here, killing people?" Maggie's voice rose in anger. "It's not that simple," Collins said. "We've tried removing them, multiple times over the decades. They always come back. The best we can do is warn people away from that sector of the park, which is why I'm surprised you were there. That area is supposed to be closed to the public." "Our permits were for Sage Creek," I said. "We met a ranger named Matthews who approved them." Collins frowned. "There's no Ranger Matthews in this park." A chill ran through me. "Tall guy, gray mustache? Had a younger ranger with him named Jim?" "No rangers by those names here." Collins' hand moved back to her gun. What exactly did these rangers look like? As I described them, Collins' face grew increasingly grim. "The scar on Jim's face," she said. "From eye to jaw?" I nodded. "That wasn't a ranger. That was Jeremiah Blackwood, the younger one." "But we saw him at the cabin," Maggie protested. "Much older." "They appear differently to different people," Collins said. "They show you what they think will gain your trust. Or fear." "So Jeremiah was at the ranger station? That's impossible. We left him at the cabin," I said. Collins shook her head. "There's more than one of them. A whole family. Or what looks like a family." "How many?" Maggie asked. "We don't know for sure. At least 6 that we've documented. But they can split themselves somehow, be in multiple places at once." This was too much to process. "But what do they want?" I asked. Collins didn't answer immediately. When she did, her voice was flat. "Food." The word hung in the air between us. I remembered Jeremiah's comment about dinner, Martha's remark about David not screaming much. "The missing hikers," Maggie said quietly. "That's why there are so many." Collins nodded. "We've tried to keep people out of that area, but somehow permits keep getting approved. Records get altered. Maps show trails where there aren't any." "So they have someone on the inside?" I asked. "Not exactly. It's more like they influence things. Bend reality a bit. Make you see what they want you to see." She gestured at the radio. "Backup should be here soon. We'll get you safely out of the park." We sat in tense silence for several minutes. I kept scanning the surroundings, half expecting to see Jeremiah or Martha materialize from behind a rock. Finally, the radio crackled to life. "Collins, this is Peters. We're about 5 minutes out. Over." "Copy that," Collins replied. "Be advised, subjects appear unharmed but disoriented. May have been in Blackwood territory for over 24 hours." "Understood. Bringing medical out." Collins turned to us. "Just to be safe, we're going to have you checked out at the hospital in Wall." "We're fine," Maggie insisted. "Just tired and dehydrated." "Standard procedure," Collins said, not meeting our eyes. "People who interact with the Blackwood sometimes develop symptoms later." "Symptoms of what?" I asked. Before Collins could answer, the sound of approaching vehicles reached us. 2 Park Service SUVs pulled up, followed by an ambulance. A balding ranger with a thick beard approached our Jeep. "Peters," he introduced himself. "Let's get you folks out of here." Everything happened quickly after that. We were ushered into one of the SUVs, given water and energy bars. A paramedic did a quick check of our vital signs, asked if we'd experienced any unusual symptoms, hallucinations, lost time, inexplicable wounds. "Just confusion with directions," Maggie told him. "No matter which way we walked, we kept ending up back at the cabin." The paramedic nodded as if this was a common complaint. Classic Blackwood tactics. They disorient their prey, wear them down. "Prey," I repeated. The word left a sour taste in my mouth. "Poor choice of words," the paramedic said quickly. "Victims." Not much better. As we prepared to leave, I noticed Collins in deep conversation with Peters, both of them glancing our way periodically. "They're worried about us," Maggie said, following my gaze. "Or about something we might do," I said. The thought had been forming in my mind for the past few minutes, that the Rangers seemed almost as concerned about containing us as they were about rescuing us. "What do you mean?" "I'm not sure, but they know more than they're telling us." The SUV's engine started, and we began the journey out of the park. I watched through the window as the stark landscape rolled by. It was beautiful in its alien way, but now all I saw were hiding places, ambush points, the suggestion of watching eyes in every shadow. We'd been driving for about 15 minutes when the ranger at the wheel, a young woman named Garcia, suddenly braked hard. "What the hell?" she muttered. Ahead, a figure stood in the middle of the road. Martha Blackwood, still in her grimy gray dress, still smiling that gap-toothed smile. "Drive around her," Peters commanded from the passenger seat. Garcia shifted to steer wide of Martha, but as she did, more figures appeared at the roadside. Jeremiah, the fake Ranger Matthews, the fake Jim, and others I hadn't seen before, all with those same pale, almost white eyes. "Don't stop," Peters said, drawing his sidearm. "No matter what." Garcia accelerated, giving Martha a wide berth. As we passed, Martha turned, still smiling, and spoke directly to me through the closed window. "See you soon, Eli Morgan." Then we were past her, the Blackwoods growing smaller in the rearview mirror. No one spoke for several minutes. Finally, Peters holstered his weapon and radioed the vehicles behind us. "Be advised, we have Blackwood activity on the main road. Proceed with caution." Static, then Collins' voice. "Copy that. We see them too." "That's unusual," Garcia said quietly to Peters. "They don't typically show themselves so openly." "They're getting bolder," Peters replied. "Or desperate." "Why would they be desperate?" I asked. The Rangers exchanged glances. "Food shortage," Peters said bluntly. "They typically take a couple of hikers a year, but the drought has driven away a lot of the wildlife they supplement with. And last year's search for those missing Boy Scouts put that whole area under scrutiny. They couldn't hunt without being noticed." "So they're hungry," Maggie said, her voice hollow. Peters nodded. "And you two wandered right into their territory." "Because someone gave us permits for that area," I said, anger rising. "Someone who looked like a park ranger." "We'll investigate that," Peters assured us. "Check the records, see how this happened." But I could tell from his tone that he expected to find nothing, or worse, to find records that wouldn't match what we remembered. the Blackwoods bending reality again, covering their tracks. We drove in silence after that, each lost in our own thoughts. I kept replaying the events of the past 2 days, trying to make sense of them. The cabin appearing in different places, the confusion with directions, Martha knowing Maggie's name. Something still didn't add up. The rest of the journey passed without incident. We reached the park headquarters where we were debriefed by more rangers and asked to provide detailed statements about our encounters with the Blackwoods. Everyone treated us with a mixture of sympathy and clinical detachment, like we were simultaneously victims and specimens. Throughout it all, Maggie remained unusually quiet. When I caught her eye, she'd smile reassuringly, but it didn't reach her eyes. Something was bothering her beyond the obvious trauma of our experience. Finally, as we waited for transport to take us to the hospital in Wall for a more thorough examination, I pulled her aside. "What is it?" I asked. "There's something you're not saying." She hesitated, glancing around to make sure no rangers were within earshot. "David," she said finally. "When he disappeared, I wasn't entirely truthful about what happened." My stomach nodded. "What do you mean?" "He didn't go hiking alone. I was with him, in the Badlands." I stared at her. "But you said—" "I know what I said," she cut me off, her voice tight. "I said he went alone because I didn't want to be investigated. I didn't want to explain why I came back, and he didn't." "What happened?" I asked, though part of me didn't want to know. Maggie took a shuddering breath. "We got lost, like we did yesterday. Kept going in circles, ending up at the same spots no matter which direction we walked. Then we found the cabin." A cold feeling settled over me. "You've seen the Blackwoods before?" She nodded. "They invited us in. Said they'd show us the way back to the trail. David wanted to go with them. I didn't. We argued. He went with them, and I—" Her voice faltered. "I ran. Just left him there." "Because you sensed something was wrong," I said, trying to understand. "Yes, but I should have tried harder to stop him, or gone for help immediately. Instead, I panicked, hiked out on my own, and told everyone he'd gone missing during a solo trip." Tears welled in her eyes. "I've been living with that guilt for 2 years. That's why I wanted to come back here, to face it, to try to find out what happened to him." "And you brought me into it," I said, the realization dawning, "without telling me the danger." "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I didn't think they'd still be here, or that they'd remember me." I felt a surge of anger, but it faded quickly. Looking at Maggie's tear-streaked face, I couldn't bring myself to add to her guilt. "We survived," I said finally. "That's what matters." She nodded gratefully, wiping her eyes. A ranger approached, Collins from the Sheep Mountain Station. "Transport's ready," she said. "We'll take you to Wall Medical Center, have you checked out, then you can make arrangements to get home." "What about our car?" I asked. "It's still at the trailhead." "We'll have it brought to you," Collins assured us. "All your belongings, too." As we followed her outside to a waiting van, I asked, "What's going to happen about the Blackwoods? They're still out there." Collins' expression hardened. "We'll increase patrols, close that entire section of the park if necessary. But honestly, they'll probably just go quiet for a while, then resurface when attention dies down. It's a cycle we've seen before." "And you just accept that? People disappearing in a national park?" The anger I hadn't directed at Maggie found a new target. Collins stopped, turning to face me. "We do everything we can with the resources we have. But we're park rangers, not an army. And the Blackwoods, they're not something you can fight with conventional methods." "Then what are they?" Maggie asked. "Really?" Collins hesitated, then said, "There's a Lakota word for them, Wakinyan Sapa, the Black Spirits. Beings that were once human but chose to feed on their own kind and became something else. The land itself protects them now, or maybe they've become part of it. Either way, they've been here a lot longer than we have, and they'll probably be here long after we're gone." With that sobering thought, we were loaded into the van and driven to Wall. The medical check revealed nothing unusual, just dehydration, minor scrapes, and blisters from my new boots. We were given something to help us sleep and a referral for counseling to deal with the trauma. Our car was delivered as promised along with our belongings. Everything seemed untouched, though I couldn't shake the feeling something was different. We spent one night in a local motel, then began the long drive back to Manhattan the following morning. We didn't speak much during the journey. What was there to say? Our relationship, already strained before the trip, had been fundamentally altered by what we'd experienced. Not broken, exactly, but changed into something neither of us fully recognized yet. As South Dakota fell away behind us, I thought about the Blackwoods, their two wide smiles, their hunger, the way they bent reality around them. I wondered how many other hikers would encounter them in the years to come, lured by falsified permits or manipulated maps into that pocket of twisted space the locals called a thin place. On our second night on the road, we stopped at a motel in Ohio. As I was unpacking my bag, I found something I didn't recognize. A small, leather-bound journal tucked between my clothes. Maggie's journal, the one Jeremiah had been holding. With trembling hands, I opened it. Most of the pages were filled with Maggie's familiar handwriting. Trip plans, personal reflections, sketches of plants and animals. But the last entry was different. The handwriting was spidery and unfamiliar. "See you next time, Eli Morgan. The land remembers, and so do we." I closed the journal and set it aside, my hands shaking. I didn't show it to Maggie. She'd been through enough. We reached New York 3 days after escaping the Badlands. Maggie moved out of our shared apartment a week later. We both needed space, she said. Time to process what had happened. I didn't argue. Sometimes at night, I dream of the Badlands. Those alien spires and buttes, the vast silence, the circle of stones around our tent, and in the dreams, I'm always walking, trying to find my way out, while behind me, Martha's singing drifts on the wind. And sometimes, just as I wake, I catch a glimpse of pale eyes watching me from the corner of my bedroom, or hear a soft chuckle that sounds like Jeremiah. The doctors call it PTSD. They've given me medication that helps most of the time, but occasionally I'll find small stones arranged in a circle on my windowsill, or catch the scent of prairie grass in a Manhattan apartment where no such plants exist. And I know that Collins was right about one thing. The Blackwoods have become part of the land, and the land remembers. It remembers, and it waits, and sometimes, when you're not looking, it follows you home. My name is Eli Morgan. I'm 34 years old, and I'm never going hiking again. My name is Marcus Thorne. I'm 34 years old. This happened in October 2023, and I still struggle to sleep through the night. Looking back, I should have seen the warning signs. The way Eliza's dog, Rusty, refused to leave the car when we arrived at the trailhead. The strange silence in the forest. Not a single bird call or insect chirp. The subtle unease that settled over our group like a fine mist as we ventured deeper into the Black Hills wilderness of South Dakota. "We're almost to the lookout point," I said, consulting the trail map. "Should be another mile or so." Our hiking group consisted of 4 co-workers from the marketing agency where we all worked in Minneapolis. Myself, my girlfriend Eliza Chen, 32, creative director and owner of an overly protective Australian shepherd named Rusty, Devin Wallace, 29, our social media specialist and self-proclaimed survival expert, and Naomi Blackwell, 35, account manager and the one who'd suggested this particular trail in the first place. "Are you sure this is the right way?" Eliza asked, brushing her dark hair from her face as she squinted at the increasingly narrow path ahead. Rusty whined softly at her side, pressing against her leg. The trail markers stopped a while back. I checked the GPS on my phone. Signal's weak, but yeah, this should be it. Custard Peak Trail. Devin adjusted his backpack straps. Well, the map says there's a gorgeous view at the summit, and we've already hiked 4 miles. I'm not turning back now. He'd always been stubborn that way. Once Devin set his mind on something, there was no changing it. His confidence could be reassuring, but sometimes it veered into recklessness. "I've hiked these hills before," Naomi said, though something in her voice sounded off. "But not this specific trail. The ranger at the station said it was less traveled but worth it for the views." The early October air carried a biting chill as the afternoon waned. We'd planned to reach the campsite before dark, set up our tents, and enjoy dinner around a fire. But the hike was taking longer than expected, and the daylight was fading faster than it should have. "We need to pick up the pace," I said, noticing shadows stretching abnormally long across the forest floor. "Sunsets in about an hour." As we continued upward, the forest around us changed subtly. The ponderosa pines grew closer together, their branches interlocking above like gnarled fingers. Mist began to coil around the tree trunks, despite the day being clear and dry just hours before. Rusty's behavior worsened. He began growling at nothing, the fur on his back standing on end. "What is it, boy?" Eliza knelt beside him, concern etched across her face. "Probably just a deer," Devin offered, but he reached for the hunting knife he kept strapped to his leg nonetheless. That's when I noticed Naomi standing completely still, staring off the side of the trail, her face drained of color. "Naomi, you okay?" She didn't respond immediately. When she finally turned to me, her eyes seemed unfocused. "I thought I saw someone watching us from behind that rock formation." Devin immediately moved toward where she was pointing, but I grabbed his arm. "Let's stick together. Could have been a shadow." "Or wildlife," Eliza added, though she didn't sound convinced. "No," Naomi's voice was barely above a whisper. "It was a man. Or something like a man. Too thin. Too tall." We all fell silent, listening intently. The forest held no sounds except our breathing and Rusty's low, continuous growl. "Let's keep moving," I finally said. "We're almost there, and I'd prefer to make camp before dark." As we continued along the path, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being followed. Every few minutes I'd glance back over my shoulder, expecting to see something, or someone, trailing us. There was never anything visible, yet the sensation persisted. The trail suddenly opened into a small clearing, revealing a breathtaking vista of layered mountains stretching into the distance. Under different circumstances, we would have paused to admire the view, maybe take some photos. Instead, we quickly began setting up our tents, the unspoken tension making us work faster than usual. Devin got a fire going as the last light faded from the sky. We sat around it, eating our packed dinners mostly in silence. Even Devin, normally the group's chatterbox, seemed subdued. "Anyone else notice how quiet it is?" Eliza finally said, voicing what we'd all been thinking. "No crickets, no nightbirds." "It's unusually cold for this time of year," Naomi offered. "Maybe they're all hibernating early." I knew that wasn't right. Nature doesn't just fall silent like that, but I didn't want to fuel the growing unease. As if reading my thoughts, Devin spoke up. "When animals go quiet, it usually means there's a predator nearby." "Really helpful, Dev," I muttered, watching Eliza's knuckles turn white as she gripped her mug of instant coffee. "Just stating facts," he shrugged. "Mountain lions are common in these parts." Rusty, who had been lying close to Eliza, suddenly jumped to his feet, facing the darkness beyond our campfire. His growl became a series of aggressive barks. "Rusty, quiet," Eliza commanded, but for the first time since I'd known them, the dog ignored her completely. We all turned toward where Rusty was facing. The firelight couldn't penetrate more than a few feet into the inky blackness. "I'm going to check it out," Devin said, reaching for his flashlight. "No, you're not," I countered. "If there is something out there, let's not split up." "It's probably just a curious animal," he insisted, already standing. "Devin, sit down." Naomi's voice was sharp with fear. "Please." He reluctantly rejoined us by the fire. but kept his flashlight trained on the darkness. Minutes passed in tense silence. Eventually, Rusty stopped barking, though he remained alert, his ears perked forward. "We should take shifts tonight," I suggested. 2 hours each. I'll go first. No one argued. After arranging the watch schedule, me, then Devin, Eliza, and finally Naomi, everyone except me retreated to their tents. Eliza kissed me goodnight, her lips cold against mine. "Be careful," she whispered. "Wake me if anything happens." Rusty followed her into the tent they would share, though the dog kept glancing back into the darkness. I sat alone by the fire, feeding it occasionally to keep the flames alive. The silence was oppressive, broken only by the occasional crack of burning wood. I checked my phone. 10:30 p.m. and no service. The GPS app wouldn't load either. I tried not to let this worry me. Reception was often spotty in remote areas. About an hour into my watch, I heard it. A whisper so faint I first thought it was just the wind. But there was no breeze that night. It came again, slightly louder, though I couldn't make out any words. It seemed to be coming from all around me, not any particular direction. I stood up, gripping the heavy flashlight like a weapon. "Who's there?" I called, my voice sounding unnaturally loud in the silence. No response, but the whispering stopped. When it was time to wake Devin for his shift, I hesitated outside his tent. Part of me wanted to let him sleep and continue the watch myself. I didn't want to be alone with my thoughts, and I certainly didn't want to try sleeping after what I'd heard. But exhaustion was clouding my judgment, and I knew I needed rest. I unzipped his tent. "Devin, your watch." He emerged looking surprisingly alert, as if he hadn't been sleeping at all. "Everything okay?" I considered telling him about the whispers, but decided against it. It could have been my imagination. Fatigue playing tricks. "All quiet," I lied. As I crawled into my own tent, I realized how cold it had become. My breath fogged in front of my face despite being inside the tent. I zipped myself into my sleeping bag, checking that my pocket knife was within reach, and tried to calm my racing mind. Sleep came eventually, but it wasn't restful. I dreamed of running through endless forest, pursued by something I couldn't see but could feel watching me. In the dream, I kept calling for the others, but my voice made no sound. I woke to Devin shaking me roughly. "Marcus, get up!" I shot upright, instantly alert. "What is it? What's wrong?" His face was ashen in the beam of his flashlight. "Naomi's gone." "What do you mean, gone?" I scrambled out of my sleeping bag. "I went to wake her for her shift and she's not in her tent. Her sleeping bag is empty." Outside, Eliza was already searching the perimeter of our campsite, Rusty at her heels. The dog was agitated, sniffing frantically at the ground and air. "Her boots are still here," Eliza said, pointing to Naomi's hiking boots neatly placed outside her tent. "And her jacket. Why would she leave without shoes?" Devin's voice cracked with stress. "It's freezing out here." I checked my watch, 3:14 a.m. "When did you last see her? Did you hear anything during your watch?" "Nothing unusual," Devin said. "I woke Eliza at 12:30 as planned, then went to sleep." I turned to Eliza. "And during your watch?" She shook her head. "Everything was quiet. Too quiet. I was supposed to wake Naomi at 2:30, but when I went to her tent..." She trailed off, hugging herself. "We need to search for her," I said, already reaching for my flashlight and jacket. "She can't have gone far without shoes, especially in this cold." "Should we split up?" Devin asked. "Absolutely not," I replied firmly. "We stay together. Let's check in expanding circles from the camp." We spent the next hour calling Naomi's name and searching the surrounding area. Rusty led the way, his nose to the ground, but even he seemed confused, doubling back and changing direction frequently. The forest felt wrong. The trees seemed to shift positions when viewed from the corner of my eye. Our flashlight beams didn't penetrate as far as they should have, and the whispering I'd heard earlier had returned, now audible to all of us. "Do you hear that?" Eliza asked, her voice barely audible. Devin nodded slowly. Sounds like talking. Multiple voices. We need to go back to camp, I said, suddenly certain that leaving had been a mistake. Now. No one argued. We hurried back, Rusty leading the way. But as our campsite came into view, we all stopped short. A figure stood by the dying fire. For a moment, hope surged. Naomi had returned, but as the figure turned toward us, I knew immediately it wasn't her. It had Naomi's general shape and was wearing her clothes, but even in the dim light I could tell something was terribly wrong. It stood too straight, its proportions slightly off, its movements jerky and unnatural. "Naomi?" Devin called hesitantly. The figure didn't respond. It just stared in our direction, head tilted at an impossible angle. Beside me, Eliza gripped my arm so tightly it hurt. Rusty was now growling, hackles raised, but he wouldn't move forward. "That's not Naomi," Eliza whispered. As if hearing her, the figure smiled, a wide, unnatural stretching of lips that revealed too many teeth. Then it spoke, but the voice that emerged wasn't Naomi's. It was deep, guttural, and seemed to contain multiple tones speaking simultaneously. "Join us in the hollow," it said. "The whispering man is waiting." Devin took a step back. What the fuck is happening? The thing that wasn't Naomi jerked its head to look directly at him. "Devin Wallace," it said in that same wrong voice, "you don't believe in the old ways. The whispering man will show you." Then it turned and ran into the forest with inhuman speed, moving in a bizarre, spider-like gait that made my stomach turn. For several seconds we stood frozen in horror. Rusty's growls had turned to whimpers and he pressed against Eliza's legs. "We need to leave," I finally said. "Now. Pack only what's essential." "But Naomi," Devin started. "That wasn't Naomi," Eliza cut him off. "And I don't think we'll find her." "We can't just abandon her," Devin protested. "We'll report her missing once we get back to civilization," I said, already moving toward the tents. "But right now, we need to get out of these woods." We packed quickly, taking only water, energy bars, and absolute essentials. Dawn was still hours away, but none of us suggested waiting for daylight. Whatever was happening, we needed to put distance between ourselves and this place. "The trail we came in on," I said, consulting my map by flashlight. "If we follow it back, we should reach the main road by mid-morning." Devin was uncharacteristically quiet, his earlier bravado completely gone. Eliza kept one hand firmly on Rusty's collar, her face set in grim determination. As we prepared to leave, my flashlight beam caught something on a nearby tree that made me freeze. Carved into the bark was a crude symbol, a circle with a vertical line through it, surrounded by smaller marks that looked like tally marks. "Guys," I called softly, "look at this." Devin and Eliza joined me. "What is it?" Eliza asked. "I don't know, but..." I swept my flashlight around and realized with growing horror that the same symbol was carved into multiple trees surrounding our campsite. These weren't here when we arrived. "Let's go," Devin said, his voice tight with fear. "Now." We set off down the trail, moving as quickly as possible while still being cautious. The forest seemed to close in around us, branches reaching like fingers, roots rising from the ground to trip us. More than once, I was certain a tree had moved to block our path, forcing us to detour. The whispering grew louder as we walked, sometimes sounding like it was right beside my ear, other times seeming to come from deep within the earth beneath our feet. Occasionally, I could make out words or phrases. "Stay," "Join us," "Never leave." But mostly, it was an incomprehensible murmur. An hour into our retreat, the trail simply vanished. Where there should have been a clear path, there was now only unbroken forest. "This doesn't make sense," I said, checking the map again. "We followed the trail exactly." "Maps can be wrong," Devin suggested, but the tremor in his voice betrayed his growing panic. "Or maybe the trail isn't," Eliza said quietly. "Maybe the forest is changing." It was the thought we'd all been avoiding, the impossible reality we were facing. This wasn't just being lost. Something was actively working against us, manipulating our surroundings. "The sun will rise soon," I said, trying to sound more confident than I felt. "We can use that to navigate east, back toward the road." But when dawn finally came, the light was wrong, dim and filtered as if passing through murky water. The forest remained in deep shadow, and the sun, what little we could see of it through the canopy, seemed to be in the wrong position. "That can't be right," Devin said, staring up at the pale disk barely visible through the trees. "The sun should be rising in the east, but that's north? How is that possible?" I checked my compass and felt my stomach drop. The needle was spinning wildly, never settling on any direction. My watch had stopped at 3:14 a.m., the time we'd discovered Naomi missing. Devin's and Eliza's watches showed the same. "Our phones," Eliza suggested, pulling hers out. The screen was black and wouldn't turn on, despite having had nearly full battery the night before. Devin's and mine were the same. We were truly cut off. As the strange half-light of day continued, we pushed on, choosing a direction and sticking to it, hoping to eventually reach some sign of civilization. But the forest seemed endless, with no landmarks or features to guide us. Hours passed. Our water supplies dwindled. Hunger gnawed at us, but no one suggested stopping to eat. We were driven by a primal need to escape, to keep moving. Then Rusty, who had been leading our small group, suddenly stopped and refused to go further. The dog's behavior had been our most reliable warning system, and we all froze, watching him intently. He was staring ahead, his entire body rigid with fear. Following his gaze, I saw it, a small clearing where the trees thinned. In the center stood a crude stone altar, ancient and weather-worn. Around it were arranged small objects that I initially mistook for branches or stones. It was only as we drew cautiously closer that I realized they were bones, animal and, horrifyingly, what appeared to be human. "We need to go another way," I whispered, grabbing Devin's arm as he moved toward the altar, but Devin shook me off. "Look," he said, pointing. "There's something on top of it." Against my better judgment, we approached the altar. On its flat surface lay a small leather-bound book, its cover unmarked. Next to it was a very modern item that made my blood run cold, Naomi's phone. Devin reached for the book. I wanted to stop him but couldn't find my voice. As his fingers touched the leather, a sound like 1,000 whispers crescendoed around us, and the temperature plummeted. My breath came out in white clouds, and frost began forming on the ground at our feet. Eliza's grip on Rusty tightened. "Devin, don't—" But he had already opened the book. His eyes widened as he scanned the first page. "It's a journal," he said, "dated 1897. He began to read aloud. "I have found the hollow where they say the Whispering Man dwells. The locals warn against entering these woods, speaking of travelers who never return and those who come back, changed. But such superstitions cannot deter scientific inquiry. Tomorrow, I venture deeper." Devin flipped through more pages, his expression growing increasingly disturbed. "Listen to this. The whispers are real. They guided me to the hollow, to the ancient stone. There is power here, old and hungry. It promised knowledge beyond mortal understanding, if I would only serve as its voice among men." The last entry Devin read chilled me more than the unnatural cold around us. "I am changing. My thoughts are no longer entirely my own. When I look at my reflection, sometimes another face looks back. Too thin, too tall, smiling too wide. I fear what I am becoming, yet I cannot leave. The Whispering Man won't let me. He needs a new voice, and I think I have been chosen." As Devin finished reading, the whispers around us intensified, becoming almost deafening. Rusty broke free from Eliza's grip and bolted, disappearing into the trees. "Rusty!" Eliza screamed, starting after him. I caught her arm. "We have to stay together." But she pulled away from me, panic overwhelming reason. "I can't lose him." Before I could stop her, she was running in the direction Rusty had gone. Devin and I had no choice but to follow. We crashed through the undergrowth calling Eliza's name. The forest seemed to deliberately impede us, branches whipping at our faces, roots rising to trip us. The whispers followed, mocking our efforts. When we finally caught up to Eliza, she was standing at the edge of a vast depression in the earth, a hollow. It stretched at least 100 yards across, ringed by abnormally tall, thin trees that bent inward, creating a natural cathedral. The ground within was bare earth, marked with the same symbols we'd seen carved into the trees, and in the center stood Eliza, utterly still, facing away from us. "Eliza!" I called, my voice sounding small in the vastness of the hollow. She turned slowly. It was Eliza, but her eyes were wrong. Too dark, too deep, as if I was looking into endless pits. "Marcus," she said, and I nearly wept with relief because it was her voice. "I found Rusty." I followed her gaze to where the dog lay on the ground. From a distance, he appeared to be sleeping, but something in Eliza's tone told me otherwise. "The whispering man took him," she continued, her voice now overlaid with something else, a deeper resonance that wasn't human. "He'll take us all, one by one. He's so hungry, Marcus, so lonely." Devin grabbed my shoulder. "We need to get her and go. Now." I nodded, but as we took a step toward the hollow, the ground began to shake. The bare earth in the center started to bulge upward, as if something was pushing from below. "He's coming," Eliza said, smiling now. That same terrible, too-wide smile the thing wearing Naomi's form had shown. "The whispering man wants to meet you." The earth split open with a sound like tearing flesh. From the gaping wound in the ground emerged a figure so wrong, so counter to everything natural, that my mind struggled to process what I was seeing. It was tall, impossibly tall, with limbs that bent at unnatural angles. Its skin was pallid and stretched too tight over its frame, revealing the shapes of bones that weren't quite human. Its face was the worst part, features that approximated humanity but were subtly, terribly wrong. Its mouth stretched from ear to ear in a rictus grin filled with needle-like teeth, and it was whispering, a constant, multi-layered sound that seemed to contain thousands of different voices. The whispering man, for what else could it be, reached out toward Eliza with elongated fingers. She didn't move away but stood welcoming its touch. "Eliza, run!" I screamed, finally finding my voice. The creature's head snapped in my direction. Its eyes, black, endless voids, fixed on me, and I felt something invasive probe at my mind, sifting through my thoughts and memories like fingers through loose soil. "Marcus Thorne," it whispered, my name sounding obscene in its mouth. "Your fear is exquisite. It has been so long since I tasted such pure terror." Devin, acting on instinct or desperation, pulled out his hunting knife and lunged forward. "Get away from her!" The whispering man moved with uncanny speed. One moment it was near Eliza, the next it was directly in front of Devin. A long, pale hand closed around his throat, lifting him off the ground as if he weighed nothing. "Devin Wallace," it hissed, "the doubter, the skeptic. Let me show you wonders beyond your comprehension." I watched in horror as the creature's mouth opened wider than any human mouth could, unhinging like a snake's jaw. From the blackness within emerged what looked like tendrils of shadow, which forced their way into Devin's mouth, nose, and ears. His body convulsed violently, his eyes rolling back in his head. When the tendrils withdrew, Devin collapsed to the ground, twitching. I was frozen in place, terror overwhelming my will to move. The creature turned its attention back to me. "You are next, Marcus Thorne. Your essence will sustain me. Your voice will join my chorus." It began moving toward me with that same jerky, inhuman gait. Behind it, I saw Eliza fall to her knees beside Rusty's still form, her face blank and expressionless. Something inside me snapped. Not like this, I thought. We would not end like this. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my lighter, an old Zippo that had belonged to my father. The hollow was dry, the ground covered in dead leaves and brittle branches. Fire, I whispered to myself. Purifying fire. The creature hesitated, its head tilting at an impossible angle. What are you planning, little morsel? Instead of answering, I flicked the lighter and tossed it into a pile of dry leaves near the edge of the hollow. The flame caught immediately, spreading with supernatural speed, as if the forest itself wanted cleansing. The whispering man let out a sound that was part shriek, part roar, and partly the agonized cries of countless trapped voices. It recoiled from the flames, its form seeming to flicker and destabilize. I used its distraction to dash toward Eliza. As the fire spread around the perimeter of the hollow, creating a ring of flame, I reached her and grabbed her arm. "Eliza, we have to go." Her eyes remained unfocused, but she didn't resist as I pulled her to her feet. The part of me that had loved her dog wanted desperately to check on Rusty, but one glance confirmed what I already knew. He was gone. "Devin," I called, looking for him through the growing smoke. He was on his feet, but something was terribly wrong. His movements were jerky and uncoordinated, his head lolling to one side. When he turned toward me, his eyes were black voids, just like the creature's. "Marcus," he said, but it wasn't his voice anymore. "Why resist? The whispering man offers eternity." The fire was spreading rapidly now, consuming the dry forest with unnatural hunger. Smoke billowed around us, making it hard to see or breathe. Through the haze, I could make out the whispering man, writhing in apparent pain as the flames drew closer to the center of the hollow. I made a split-second decision that still haunts me. "I'm sorry, Devin," I whispered, then turned and dragged the near-catatonic Eliza away from the hollow toward what I hoped was the direction of the trail. Behind us, Devin, or what had once been Devin, let out an inhuman howl that merged with the shrieking of the whispering man and the roar of the fire. We ran blindly through the burning forest, the smoke burning our lungs and stinging our eyes. Eliza moved mechanically beside me, not speaking, not resisting. I had no idea if she was still in there, if whatever the whispering man had done to her could be undone. By some miracle, or perhaps because whatever malevolent force had been controlling the forest was now occupied with its own survival, we stumbled onto a clear path. It wasn't the trail we'd come in on, but it was definitely man-made, and it headed downhill. We followed it desperately, the sounds of the forest fire growing distant behind us. After what felt like hours but might have been minutes, the trees began to thin, and suddenly we were at a roadside. A pickup truck was approaching. I waved frantically, and it slowed to a stop beside us. An elderly man with a weathered face leaned out the window, eyes widening at our smoke-blackened appearance. "What in tarnation happened to you folks?" he asked. "Forest fire," I gasped. "Our friend, still back there?" The man immediately reached for his phone. "I'll call it in. Get in the truck, both of you. There's a ranger station 5 miles down the road." As we climbed into the truck bed, the man gave us a long, assessing look. "You were up by Whispering Hollow, weren't you?" I stared at him. "You know about that place?" He nodded grimly. "Locals know to stay away. Every few years, some outsiders wander in there and, well, not everyone comes out, and those who do ain't always right afterward." He glanced at Eliza, who sat motionless, staring at nothing. "Your lady friend there, has she spoken since you got out?" I shook my head. "Might never speak again," he said quietly. "I've seen it before. The whispering man takes something from them, some vital spark. Some recover, given time. Others—" He didn't finish the thought, just put the truck in gear and began driving toward the ranger station. The authorities found Devin's body 3 days later when the fire finally burned itself out. The official report listed the cause of death as smoke inhalation, but I knew better. What they buried wasn't really Devin anymore. Naomi was never found. As for Eliza, she spent 6 months in a psychiatric facility. She never spoke of what happened in those woods, never explained what she saw or experienced in the hollow. She recovered enough to function in society again, but the woman I loved was gone, replaced by someone who moved through life like a sleepwalker, never fully present. We broke up shortly after her release. I couldn't look at her without seeing that too wide smile, without hearing whispers at the edge of my awareness. I moved away from Minnesota, changed my name, tried to start fresh, but the nightmares follow me. In them, I'm back in that hollow watching as the whispering man rises from the earth. Only in the dreams, I don't find my lighter. In the dreams, I join the chorus of whispers. Sometimes on quiet nights when the wind is still, I swear I can hear them. Devin, Naomi, even parts of Eliza that never made it out of those woods. They whisper to me, calling me back to the hollow. And sometimes when I catch my reflection unawares, I see someone else looking back. Too thin, too tall, smiling too wide. The fire didn't end it. You can't destroy something that ancient with mere flames. I bought myself time, nothing more. I know now why they call it the Whispering Man. Because once it speaks to you, you never stop hearing its voice. It's patient. It can wait. And someday, I'll answer its call.